My name is Sophia Mitchell, 38 years old, married to Daniel for nearly 15 years. We have a son, Ethan, who just turned 12. 3 years ago, after Daniel's father passed away from a sudden heart attack, we made what I now recognize as a critical mistake. We moved into his mother's spacious Victorian home to help her adjust to widowhood. Vivian Mitchell had always been particular about her preferences, but I never anticipated how dramatically our living arrangement would transform her from a merely opinionated mother-in-law into what felt like my personal tormentor. The first indications appeared subtly: small comments about the laundry not being folded correctly, questions about why I chose certain ingredients for family meals, remarks about Ethan's schedule being too structured despite her previous complaints about modern children lacking discipline. "Sophia, dear," she would say, wandering into the kitchen where I prepared dinner after my full workday as an accountant, "don't you think the chicken is a bit overdone?" She would pick up a piece with 2 fingers, examining it with a disappointed frown before setting it back down. I always found that Daniel preferred his chicken more tender. His father was quite particular about that too. These interactions grew increasingly frequent, yet whenever Daniel entered the room, Vivian transformed entirely. "Oh, Daniel, your Sophia is such a treasure in the kitchen. I was just telling her how impressed I am with her chicken recipe. Isn't it delicious?" She would beam, patting my shoulder with such convincing affection that Daniel would smile appreciatively at both of us, completely unaware of the preceding criticism. I initially attributed her behavior to grief and adjustment. Perhaps she needed to assert control over her environment after losing her husband of 40 years. I made allowances, bit my tongue, and tried harder to accommodate her preferences. My patience began to waver when Vivian's interventions extended beyond household matters to parenting decisions. Ethan had always excelled academically, but he struggled with anxiety before exams. When he expressed interest in applying to Preston Academy, a prestigious private school known for its advanced science program, Daniel and I supported his ambition while establishing a reasonable study schedule with appropriate breaks. Vivian vehemently opposed this plan. "You're ruining his childhood with all this studying," she declared one evening, interrupting our family discussion about Ethan's application preparation. When Daniel was young, we never pressured him with extra classes and tutors. Children should be playing outside, not hunched over books every evening. "Mom," Daniel responded calmly, "the world is different now. Competition for good schools starts earlier, and this is something Ethan wants. He only wants it because you two have conditioned him to seek your approval through achievement." Vivian countered, looking directly at me as if Daniel's parenting approach was entirely my influence. I maintained my composure but firmly stated, "Ethan specifically asked about Preston after his science teacher mentioned their robotics program. We're following his lead, not pushing him." Vivian's lips thinned into a tight line. "Well, we'll see how long his enthusiasm lasts when he has no childhood to look back on." The conversation ended there, but Vivian's interference continued. She began scheduling surprise outings during Ethan's designated study periods, bringing home excessive treats that contradicted our attempts to maintain healthy eating habits, and questioning our parental decisions in front of Ethan, undermining our authority. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned from work to find Ethan's study materials scattered across the living room floor. "Vivian? Ethan? What happened here?" I called out, setting down my laptop bag. Vivian appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Oh, Ethan was looking for his science textbook. I was helping him search." The methodical destruction of our organized study space suggested otherwise. Notebooks were open to random pages, flashcards mixed together from different subjects, and several pages appeared torn from Ethan's carefully maintained planner. "Where is Ethan now?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice neutral. "I sent him to the park with some neighborhood children," she replied casually. "He seems stressed about that practice test tomorrow. Fresh air will do him more good than all these books." I stood speechless, aware that the practice test was crucial preparation for Preston Academy's entrance exam scheduled the following week. We had planned a focus review session for that evening. "Vivian, we discussed this. The practice test is important to help Ethan identify areas where he needs additional preparation." "Oh, don't be so rigid, Sophia," she dismissed with a wave of her hand. "One missed study session won't determine his future. Besides, I've been meaning to tell you that I think this whole Preston Academy business is unnecessary. The local public school was good enough for Daniel. I spent the next hour reorganizing Ethan's materials and texting him to come home. When he returned, his expression reflected confusion and guilt. "Grandma said you wouldn't mind if I took a break today," he explained hesitantly. "It's all right, Ethan," I assured him. "Let's just get back to our schedule. The test is important to you, right?" He nodded earnestly. "Yes, I really want to try for Preston." That evening, after Ethan went to bed, I attempted to discuss the situation with Daniel. "I think your mother is deliberately sabotaging Ethan's study schedule," I began carefully. "Today she scattered all his materials and sent him to the park without checking with us first." Daniel sighed. "Mom can be a bit old-fashioned about education, but I'm sure she means well. She probably just thinks Ethan needs more balance." "This isn't about different parenting philosophies, Daniel." She waited until I was at work, dismantled his organized study space, and sent him away right before an important practice test. "That's not a difference of opinion. That's deliberate interference." The conversation ended inconclusively, with Daniel promising to speak with his mother but ultimately suggesting that I might be reading too much into things because of the stress of our living arrangement. The situation reached its inevitable breaking point 3 days later. The Preston Academy entrance examination was scheduled for Saturday morning. Friday evening, Daniel and I planned a special dinner to help Ethan relax. His favorite lasagna, garlic bread, and a small ice cream dessert as a treat before his early bedtime. I left work early to prepare everything, stopping at the specialty Italian market for fresh ingredients. When I called Vivian to let her know I'd be home soon, she assured me that everything was fine and Ethan was upstairs reviewing his notes. Upon arriving home, I was immediately struck by the sound of raucous laughter and electronic game noises coming from the living room. I entered to find Ethan surrounded by 3 other boys, all playing video games amid a chaos of soda cans, chip bags, and cookie wrappers. "Ethan, what's going on?" I asked, struggling to process the scene. "Grandma said I could have friends over for a surprise pre-test party," he explained excitedly, though I detected a note of uncertainty in his voice. Vivian appeared from the kitchen, carrying another bowl of chips. "Sophia, you're early. I thought a little celebration would help Ethan relax before tomorrow. Too much studying makes for a nervous test taker." I glanced at my watch, 6:30 p.m. Ethan's bedtime was set for 9 o'clock to ensure he was well rested for the 8 o'clock AM exam. "Ethan needs a proper meal and an early night, not sugar and excitement," I said quietly, trying to avoid creating a scene in front of his friends. "We discussed this plan as a family." "Plans can change," Vivian replied dismissively. "Boys need to be boys. Besides, I've made pizza for everyone. It should be ready in about an hour." An hour of additional waiting for dinner would completely disrupt our careful schedule. I felt a surge of anger that I could no longer suppress. "Ethan, please ask your friends to head home now. We need to prepare for tomorrow," I stated firmly. "But Grandma said," he began. "I understand, but this is important. The test is early tomorrow, and we had a plan." Vivian interjected, "Don't be ridiculous, Sophia. The boys are having fun. A little excitement won't hurt his test performance. If anything, it will help him sleep better." That was the moment something inside me snapped. 3 years of accumulated frustration, undermined authority, and manipulative behavior crystallized into absolute clarity. "Boys," I addressed Ethan's friends directly, "I'm sorry, but we need to end this gathering now. Ethan has an important test tomorrow morning. I'll call your parents to pick you up." Despite protests from both the children and Vivian, I remained firm. After the boys departed and Ethan went upstairs to shower before dinner, Vivian confronted me in the kitchen. "How dare you undermine me in front of Ethan and his friends?" she demanded. "I was only trying to give him some normal childhood experiences instead of this test-obsessed environment you've created." "No, Vivian," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "You were deliberately sabotaging his preparation for something important to him. This isn't about different parenting styles, it's about respect. You don't respect our decisions as parents, and you actively work against our family's goals. That's absurd. Everything I do is for this family's benefit. Daniel would understand, even if you don't." "Then let's ask him," I suggested, hearing the front door open as Daniel arrived home from work. The ensuing conversation was uncomfortable but necessary. With Ethan upstairs, I calmly recounted the day's events and the pattern of interference that had been building for months. To my surprise and relief, Daniel didn't immediately defend his mother. "Mom, is this true?" he asked, his expression troubled. "Did you organize a party knowing Sophia and I had already planned a quiet evening for Ethan?" "I was thinking of Ethan's well-being," Vivian insisted. "All this pressure about one test can't be healthy when you were his age." "Mom," Daniel interrupted gently, "I'm not Ethan, and this isn't 25 years ago. Sophia and I make decisions together about our son's education and schedule. You need to respect that." Vivian's face flushed with indignation. "So now I'm the villain for wanting my grandson to have some fun. I suppose next you'll tell me I have no say in this house at all, my own home." An uncomfortable silence followed her outburst. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I think we need to reconsider our living arrangement." Over the next hour, as I prepared Ethan's dinner and helped him finalize his preparations for the exam, Daniel and his mother continued their discussion in hushed tones in the study. Later that night, after Ethan was asleep, Daniel joined me in our bedroom with a resolved expression. "I've talked with Mom. We're going to start looking for our own place next week." "Are you sure?" I asked, both relieved and concerned about his relationship with his mother. "Yes," he affirmed. "This isn't working. I should have listened to you sooner about how she was undermining our parenting. I'm sorry, Sophia." The next morning, Ethan took his entrance examination while Vivian remained noticeably absent from breakfast, staying in her room with claims of a headache. 2 weeks later, we received the news. Ethan had been accepted to Preston Academy with a partial merit scholarship. When we shared the news at dinner, Vivian's response was telling. While she said stiffly, "I suppose all that studying paid off after all. Though I still think." "Mom," Daniel interjected firmly, "this is a moment to celebrate Ethan's achievement without qualifications." She pressed her lips together, but nodded reluctantly. The following month, we moved into a modest 3-bedroom house just 15 minutes from Vivian's home. Close enough for regular visits, but with necessary separation to establish healthy boundaries. The transition wasn't without challenges. Vivian initially refused to visit our new home, claiming we had abandoned her, but gradually adjusted as Daniel maintained consistent contact while enforcing our parental authority. Ethan flourished at Preston Academy, his confidence growing with each academic achievement and new friendship. Without the constant tension at home, our family dynamics improved significantly. Daniel and I communicated more openly, addressing issues before they escalated. Even my relationship with Vivian slowly evolved into something more respectful, if not entirely warm. 6 months after our move, during Sunday dinner at Vivian's house, she surprised us with an unexpected acknowledgement. The science fair project Ethan presented, about renewable energy, she began hesitantly. His teachers sent me photos. He's clearly thriving at Preston. She paused, then added quietly, "Perhaps you both knew what was best for him after all." It wasn't a complete apology, but from Vivian it represented significant progress. Daniel reached across the table to squeeze his mother's hand, while I offered a genuine smile of appreciation for her effort. That evening, driving home with Ethan dozing in the backseat, Daniel remarked, "I should have recognized what was happening sooner. I'm sorry you had to endure that for so long." "We all did what we thought was right at the time," I replied. "The important thing is that we found a solution that works for everyone, especially Ethan." Daniel nodded, reaching for my hand. "And for us. I don't think I realized how much tension I was carrying until we moved. Our home feels like our asterisk home now." Looking back, I realized that sometimes the most difficult boundaries to establish are with those we care about most. Living with Vivian taught me that genuine family harmony doesn't come from endless accommodation or silent suffering, but from honest communication and mutual respect. While those 3 years under her roof were challenging, they ultimately strengthened our family unit and, unexpectedly, led to a healthier relationship with my mother-in-law, one built on clearer boundaries and earned respect rather than obligation and resentment. Today, when Vivian occasionally starts to overstep, a gentle reminder is usually sufficient, a vast improvement from where we began. She'll never be the mother-in-law of my dreams, but we found a balance that allows our family to thrive while maintaining meaningful connections across generations. And in the end, isn't that what family is truly about?
You're going to have a baby girl. Milo declared, staring intensely at me with his big blue eyes. "But there will be struggles and pain before she arrives." A hush fell over the living room as all eyes turned towards the 11-year-old boy. My cousin Amanda's face flushed red. "Milo, don't say such things," she scolded, flustered. "I'm so sorry, Bryn. You know how kids can be with their wild imaginations." I forced an awkward smile, trying to diffuse the uncomfortable tension that had settled over our small family gathering. No need to apologize. I'm sure he's just excited at the prospect of having a new little cousin to play with someday. Milo shook his head adamantly. "I'm not making it up, Mom. I saw it clear as day, like I was watching a movie in my mind." An uneasy silence lingered as Amanda searched for the right response. Before she could find the words, little Milo continued. "The baby will be beautiful, Bryn, with dark curls and green eyes, just like you. But there's a fork in the road you'll face. One path is safer, but filled with regrets and what-ifs. The other leads to your daughter, but is treacherous. Obstacles from someone you trusted will try to block your way." My chest tightened as Milo's haunting words washed over me. There was a conviction in his tone that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. For as long as I could remember, he had displayed an unsettling knack for making disturbingly accurate observations well beyond his years. Ever since Alex and I had started trying to have a child over a year ago, I couldn't help but envision our future with a house filled with the joyous sounds of little feet pattering across the floors. Was Milo's eerie prediction giving voice to the dream I had secretly been nurturing, or was this merely an overly fertile child's imagination gone wild? "Honey, you know Grandma gets worried when you say such peculiar things," Amanda said, her voice a frantic whisper as she tried to rein in her son's ramblings. But Milo's gaze remained transfixed on me, utterly undeterred. "You're strong, braver than you know, Bryn. When the dark clouds gather, don't lose your way. The rain will give way to a beautiful rainbow." I felt Alex's comforting hand on my shoulder, pulling me back to the present moment. He leaned in close, his warm breath tickling my ear. "Try not to dwell on it, babe. You know how worked up Milo can get with his overactive mind." Attempting to compose myself, I plastered on a smile and nodded. Yet no matter how fervently I tried to shake off Milo's foreboding words, they clung to me like a burr. A lingering sense of unease took root, leaving me wondering what turbulent road might lie ahead. The ding of the elevator signaled my arrival at the marketing floor where I worked at Harrison and Associates. Stepping out, I immediately spotted Alex huddled with a group of colleagues, going over analytics for an upcoming campaign. He looked up, and our eyes met. A warm smile crept across his face, his brown eyes crinkling at the corners in that way that never failed to make my heart skip a beat, even after 7 years of marriage. "There's my gorgeous wife," he called out as I approached. "Don't you all agree Bryn is a total knockout?" A chorus of laughs and agreeable murmurs followed from his coworkers. I felt my cheeks flush slightly at the compliment. "Well, aren't you just a sweet talker today?" I replied, planting a quick peck on his cheek, though I seemed to recall someone asking for my mother's famous pecan pie recipe earlier. Alex grinned sheepishly. "You know me too well. I was simply banking future brownie points to cash in later." The evening passed in a blur of prospecting calls, client meetings, and a welcomed break to share lunch together in the company cafeteria. As we chatted about our days, my thoughts inevitably drifted back to Milo's harrowing prediction. "Did I tell you Milo said the most bizarre thing at Amanda's house the other night?" I began, keeping my tone light. Alex nodded slowly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "About us having a kid? Yeah, I overheard some of it. The little guy has one hell of an imagination, that's for sure." "He was so specific, though," I persisted, unable to shake the niggling feeling that there was more to Milo's words than an overactive fantasy. The details about her looking like me with dark curls and green eyes, and the obstacles we'll apparently face from someone close to us. Alex waved his hand dismissively. "You can't honestly believe any of that nonsense, can you? Milo's a bright kid, but he's got a habit of rambling. You know how kids can get tangled up in their own little make-believe worlds." His reassuring tone sounded sincere enough. And yet, didn't he seem almost defensive? Before I could dwell further, the shrill ring of Alex's cell phone interrupted my thoughts. "It's my mom," he grumbled. not even glancing at the display before declining the call. You know how she is. A missed call is practically a federal crime in Elaine's world. I'll catch up with you in the office, babe. Planting a quick kiss on my cheek, Alex excused himself and stepped into the hallway to return his mother's call. I tried not to read too much into his weary sigh and slight grimace. Truth be told, Elaine was, well, a piece of work was putting it mildly. She meant well, I kept reminding myself. Surely her overbearing, controlling tendencies merely stemmed from her profound love for her family, misguided as they may be. Yet that rationalization rang increasingly hollow lately. Over the years, I couldn't ignore the blatant favoritism she displayed towards Alex's younger brother Dominic, her obvious golden child, and her T727 underhanded comments about how Alex and I were dragging our feet. To start a family certainly didn't help matters. A harsh cackle from outside the cafeteria snapped me back to attention. Peering out, I watched as Alex paced back and forth, the phone cradled against his ear. I'd know the clipped, impatient tone of Elaine's voice anywhere, even from a distance. Though I couldn't make out the words, her willfully oblivious son hung on every chiding utterance as his shoulders sagged lower with each passing second. My heart ached at the dispirited expression he tried and failed to conceal. Yet just as quickly a flicker of resentment ignited within me. Would I ever stop watching that insufferable woman slowly break down the spirit of the man I loved? As if sensing my gaze, Alex glanced up in my direction. Seeing me witness his humiliation, his face flushed crimson. I opened my mouth to, well, I wasn't quite sure what I intended to convey. Outrage? Reassurance? Sympathy? In that fleeting instant, a profound revelation washed over me. There were deeper currents churning beneath the surface here, far more tumultuous than I could possibly fathom, and they were swiftly sweeping me and my family towards uncharted and potentially perilous waters. The annual Springville Community Fair was in full swing when Alex and I arrived hand in hand that crisp April evening. The scent of funnel cakes and buttered popcorn wafted through the cool air as crowds meandered between rows of game booths and rides. This brings back memories, Alex reminisced with a nostalgic grin, giving my hand an affectionate squeeze. I can still smell the hot dogs my dad used to grill up while we played skee-ball for hours on end. Pretty sure that's just the aroma of the fair's famous behemoth foot-long corn dogs wafting over, I teased. As we strolled along the bustling thoroughfare, I spotted a familiar mane of auburn curls in the distance. Oh, hey, there's your mom over by the ring toss. Alex followed my gaze, his expression clouding briefly before smoothing over into a polite smile. I'll be damned. That is Elaine, being her usual center of attention self. Sure enough, the elegant Elaine Harrison was regaling a small crowd with some dramatic tale, her perfectly manicured hands gesturing animatedly. Even from across the fairgrounds, I could make out the tinkling of her practiced, mirthful laugh. I swear that woman could spin a crocheted potholder into a Tony Award-winning one-woman show, Alex muttered with a rueful shake of his head. Before I could respond, Elaine's gaze settled upon us. Her eyes ignited with an unmistakable glint of recognition, or was it something more akin to predatory relish? "Oh, Alexandra!" she trilled in a saccharine sing-song without preamble. "And if it isn't my daughter-in-law, Bryn, what a fortuitous coincidence." She navigated her way through the dispersing throng with the regal bearing of a debutante. Up close, I couldn't help but marvel at her meticulously groomed appearance, not a single silver hair out of place. "Mom," Alex replied with a curt nod. "Fancy running into you here." Elaine unleashed a theatrical pout. "Is that any way to greet your dear old mother?" Here I thought my beloved only son might spare his doting parent the occasional embrace. Alex shifted his weight uncomfortably, but dutifully complied with a stiff, one-armed hug. Elaine clung a moment longer than necessary, as if savoring her dominance. "You simply must come meet my friends from the Ladies' Historical Society, Bryn dear," she simpered, hooking her arm through mine before I could politely demur. "Why, I was just regaling them with the most delightful anecdote about you and Alexandra when you were mere babes." Unable to extricate myself, I bit the inside of my cheek to stifle the impulse to chuckle derisively at her self-proclaimed delightful anecdotes. They inevitably devolved into backhanded compliments and barbed condescension, thinly veiled as charming banter. They're enthralled, I'm sure, Alex deadpanned as we trailed behind his domineering mother. Oh, hush now, you incorrigible cynic. Where are your manners? Elaine clucked in a lofty, wounded tone over her bony shoulder, although heaven knows I shouldn't remark on what I sought to instill in you at such a tender age. I glanced over at Alex, who merely shrugged in response while massaging his temples, clearly a conditioned reflex developed over years of enduring his mother's digs. I felt the hairs on the nape of my neck prickle as an intrusive thought took root. What if Milo had been right? What if the obstacles he forewarned truly were orchestrated by someone closest to us? Would that manipulative puppet master be none other than the steel magnolia leading us along in her wake like marionettes bound to her strings? For the first time since hearing his chilling prediction, I couldn't completely dismiss Milo's words offhand. Not anymore. Elaine paused in her tracks, swiveling sharply to face us with an inquisitive arch of a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Is something the matter, dears? You both look positively stricken. She tsked lightly while shaking her head in vague disapproval. Honestly, Alexandra, that brooding petulance might have been a charming look on you when you were a boyhood scamp, but on a grown man it's simply wearying. Alex opened his mouth as if to retort, but then visibly deflated. I watched as the fleeting defiance guttered in his eyes, instantly extinguished. In that moment my throat constricted with a swell of emotions, frustration, sorrow, impotent rage. Yet beneath it all, an iron-willed determination took root. If Milo's vision was indeed a harbinger of the turmoil to come, then I would be ready. Whatever tempestuous destiny awaited on the road ahead, I wouldn't allow Elaine's machinations to steer us off course. Not if I had any say in the matter. The cloying scent of Elaine's overpowering gardenia perfume lingered in the air even after we departed the fairgrounds and arrived back home. I wrinkled my nose in mild disgust at the phantom aroma, just one more layer to peel back in the ever-complexing enigma that was my mother-in-law. Well, that was certainly an experience, Alex sighed, shrugging off his jacket. He hung it over the back of a chair, looking as mentally drained as if he'd just run a marathon. We'd barely been in Elaine's presence for an hour, but her potent dose of toxicity always managed to leave us utterly depleted. You've got to admit she's a real piece of work, I agreed wryly. Did you happen to catch what she was whispering to that friend of hers after you excused yourself to take that call? Alex pinched the bridge of his nose, grimacing. You mean when she proclaimed in a stage whisper how I was forever disappointing her expectations? Yeah, that's pretty much par for the course with Mother Dearest. Even for her, that was harsh, I murmured, sliding an arm around his waist. A few beats of silence passed between us. Then, seeming to brace himself, Alex exhaled loudly. Listen, Bryn. I've been meaning to talk to you about something, he began slowly, averting his gaze, as if steeling himself for a thorny conversation. My heart skipped a beat, bracing for bad news over some looming work crisis or other catastrophe. Mom's been, saying some things lately that have got me thinking, he continued, his words gradually gaining momentum. About us not having kids yet after being married all these years, and I know we've discussed it, but... Hold up, I interjected, recoiling slightly. Of all the things I'd braced myself for, I hadn't anticipated this conversational U-turn, much less for him to be parroting Elaine's refrains. Are you actually taking parenting cues from your mother right now? Alex held up his hands in a placating gesture. Hear me out, babe. I'm not looking to pile on the pressure or anything, just... Maybe she has a point this time? I arched an incredulous eyebrow. Elaine Harrison had permanently forfeited the benefit of any doubts from me long ago. All I'm saying is, you can't deny the nonstop hints are starting to carry a ring of truth, Alex pressed on. My brother's already knocked up wife number 2, with number 3 likely on the way before long. And here we are, hitting our mid-30s with not even the pitter-patter of one set of little feet around the house. An inexplicable lump formed in my throat as I dredged up the recurring ache that had taken root, the one I'd tried my damnedest to stifle over the past couple years. You think I don't agonize over that every single heartbeat? I shot back, unable to mask the desperation that had begun creeping into my voice. Month after month of procedures and negative tests and putting on a brave smile for yet another baby shower? Milo's recently prophesied words about our future child reverberated like a thunderclap. I could practically picture her in my mind's eye, just as he'd described. Dark ringlets framing an impish face, emerald eyes brimming with uninhibited joy and curiosity. Alex reached over and squeezed my hand, his expression softening. I hated how naked and vulnerable admitting my innermost yearnings aloud made me feel. As if he could instantly see the repressed hopes and dreams I'd compacted like a tightly wound coil all this time. "I'm not trying to make this into a fight, Bryn. You know I want a baby just as much as you," he soothed in a gentler tone. "And for what it's worth, whatever Mom's warped motivations, she does have a damn good point this time. We can't just keep putting it off forever." I digested this in silence, fidgeting with the fraying end of a throw blanket just to avoid Alex's plaintive gaze. Of course, he was right. There was no sense in denying the growing void any longer. You're right, I conceded softly. A mirthless chuckle escaped my lips. God, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but your mother may have inadvertently done us a favor here. One dark brow arched in bemusement. Come again? We're talking about the same Elaine Harrison here, right? Just hear me out, I said, holding up a finger as the first tendrils of revelation began worming their way into my consciousness. What if Elaine's constant needling wasn't just her being a nagging busybody, but something else entirely? Like she subconsciously knew this was one area she didn't have control over. Alex opened his mouth to protest, but I pressed onward, now unable to stop the deluge of epiphanies from tumbling forth. Don't you see? All this time, we've assumed she was just reflexively sticking her nose where it didn't belong. But what if there was more to it? What if she was provoking us intentionally because she wanted to undermine our growing family before it could even begin? The crease deepening between Alex's furrowed brows was the only confirmation I needed. In that instant, the wool was lifted from my eyes. Elaine's meddlesome quips had been mercurial little taunts, a campaign of psychological sabotage targeting the closest and most cherished part of her only son's life. My blood turned to ice as a new, unsettling possibility suddenly sprang to mind. Milo's warnings could have been deadly accurate. What if Elaine wasn't just voicing innocuous disapproval, but was actively plotting to thwart our efforts to conceive at every turn? Dear God, what depths had that woman's machinations plumbed? As I watched stunned realization slowly bloom across Alex's face, the dam inside me burst, unleashing a torrent of recriminations bubbling up from the past several years. Every innocuous moment between us, every perceived slight from Elaine, every prior assumption was shattered and recontextualized into something infinitely more sinister. This was no mere clash between overzealous mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. It was all part of a calculated power play waged against the happiness of my own family. I can't believe she'd go that far, Alex stammered, his voice hoarse and constricted as the weight of the appalling realization hit him. My God, Bryn, what the hell has she been up to behind our backs? My jaw clenched as determination surged through me like an electric current. If Elaine thought she'd slink back into the shadows after stirring this nest of vipers, she had another thing coming. One way or another, I would uncover the truth. No matter how dark the revelations, how damning the evidence, come hell or high water, I would drag every last one of her secrets into the light. Steeling myself, I met Alex's stricken gaze with grim resolution. I don't know, I stated with more calm than I felt, but I'm sure as hell going to find out. No more lies, no more tricks. It all ends now. I felt a jagged anticipation swirling within, not unlike a cornered animal sensing a predator's approach. Elaine had vastly underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect my family. Mother-in-law or not, it was past time I turned the tables on her poisonous games. After all, karma wasn't always a merciful mistress, as she was about to discover firsthand. I spent the next several days sifting through a disjointed trail of breadcrumbs and half-remembered inconsistencies from the past, determined to piece together the full extent of Elaine's misdeeds. The more I unearthed, the more nauseated I became at the sheer depths of her duplicity. Heated discussions with Alex yielded recollections of misplaced medical files from his OB/GYN office and Elaine's repeated insistence on joining us for every fertility clinic appointment in spite of our protestations. Offhand remarks she made about the side effects of my prescribed medications began to take on more disturbing connotations. It was during a late-night Google binge that the final, damning pieces clicked into place. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding as I absorbed the information on the overview for hypomatic, a medication primarily used to treat polycystic ovarian syndrome, but also routinely prescribed for infertility issues. Elaine had slipped it into her own casual references several times, randomly bringing up the drug's purported side effects of fatigue, nausea, and severe disruptions to a woman's menstrual cycle. My blood turned to ice as I recalled the protracted stretches of debilitating cramps and unpredictable spotting of the past few years, issues my OBGYN had repeatedly chalked up to stress or hormonal imbalances. All this time, we'd been inadvertently poisoning my chances of conceiving, but not by mistake, by insidious, premeditated design. "Alex," I hissed, shoving his slumbering form, "wake up, this is serious." 2 weeks later, I stared grimly at the faces of my assembled family and in-laws, mentally bracing myself for what was to come. Elaine primped and fretted over her doting audience as usual, clueless to the reckoning that awaited. I caught her mid-flow, skewering her with an unwavering look. "Elaine!" Her theatrical prattling cut off as abruptly as a record scratching. Surprise flickered across her features. "Why, Bryn?" she tittered, pasting on a look of sugary faux innocence. "What an unexpected interruption. You're being terribly rude, dear." I felt Alex shift his stance beside me, a tectonic plate preparing to unleash its fury. "Rude?" I echoed softly, my tone dangerously level. "You want to lecture me on rude?" Her mask faltered just a bit, revealed a glimmer of reptilian blankness. I seized on it like a falcon spotting its prey's vulnerability. "When did it start, Elaine?" I demanded, determined not to let her wrest back control of the conversation. "A year ago? 5? Or did your pathological mania to undermine Alex's happiness start even before we were married?" A spattering of tense murmurs, shuffling feet. She cast an imperious glance around the room. Any other time, those present would have folded like a circus tent beneath her withering stare. Today, however, her usual sycophants merely exchanged wary, sidelong looks, feeding off the undercurrents of tension. I didn't give her an opportunity to regain her bearings. "You've spent years sabotaging every attempt we made to start a family," I declared, raising my chin in grim defiance. "Switched medications, planted self-doubt, forged medical records. Am I even scratching the surface?" The atmosphere was charged with stunned silence. It was as if I'd let the air out of the proverbial room with an icy exhale. My eyes bored into Elaine's, unblinking. I wasn't a woman prone to histrionics or shallow appeals for sympathy, but the circus master before me had pushed beyond any reasonable boundaries. It was time to reveal the viper lurking behind the curtain, teeth and all. "Well?" I challenged, my words slicing through the vacuum as I unleashed the full brunt of my fury. "What's your excuse, Elaine? I hope it's more compelling than envy or some twisted need to control your son." "How dare you?" Her voice emerged laced with a venom as potent as her actions, dripping with a quiet rage that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. But I refused to shrink before the sputtering forge of her indignant ire. It was her turn to cower beneath my glare's menacing weight. "You sanctimonious little Mother!" A thick, furious bellow rent the air. It was Alex, his face a twisted mask of betrayal and incandescent rage. My normally mild-mannered husband was unrecognizable, every tightly coiled wire wound from years of abuse snapping in a blinding instant. "I cannot fathom the level of abject evil it took to do something like this to your own family," he growled in a voice even lower and more terrifying than his outburst. "To your own blood." Elaine's jaw worked furiously, struggling to formulate a response. For one fleeting instant, I caught a glimpse of the naked fear in her eyes. Good, I thought in a moment of callous savagery. Let her seize in terror over the fire she'd willfully stoked. How I wish I could savor that momentary flicker of weakness longer, but a whiplash of movement and sound drew my eyes away. Just as Dominic lunged to his feet, his arms rigid at his sides as his body went ramrod straight. I followed his burning, accusatory gaze over to where Elaine stiffened, caught in the crossfire. It dawned on me then with dawning certitude and horror. The oblivious golden child knew nothing of his mother's twisted machinations, until now. The tableau before us crystallized into a grotesque artifice, a brittle dollhouse facade concealing a nest of vipers far deadlier than we'd imagined. Yet even amid the carnage lay a tragic figure, a perpetually favored son opening his eyes for the first time to the rot lurking within his clan's foundation. I opened my mouth, but no sound emerged. What remained to be said? The damage had been wrought, the reckoning delivered. The shattered shards of our once idyllic existence lay strewn at our feet like a broken mirror. There was no piecing anything back together. Not after this. In the suffocating silence that blanketed the room, you could have heard a pin drop. Elaine remained rooted in place, her chin jutting out in a defiant tilt as she dared us with those reptilian eyes to make the next move. Alex and I steeled ourselves, squaring our shoulders as if bracing for an imminent attack. It was Dominic who finally broke the spell, shattering the fragile stalemate with a choked utterance. "Mom?" The plaintiveness in his tone sliced through me, conjuring an image of a frightened child pleading for reassurance from the monsters under his bed. My heart twisted in sorrow and impotent anger over the innocence that monster had shattered for us all. Elaine pivoted on her heel to face her youngest, her eyebrows arched in a look of haughty innocence that would have been convincing if not for the smear of panic telegraphed in her strained features. "Well, don't just gawk at me like one of your insipid beta fish, Dominic," she snapped with a derisive wave of her hand. "Your sister-in-law is clearly deranged if she thinks—" "Don't," Dominic interrupted, his voice hardening to a tone I'd never heard from the normally affable man. "I beg your pardon?" Elaine sputtered, aghast at the unaccustomed insolence from her favored golden child. Dominic swallowed hard, seeming to steady himself with a deep breath. When his gaze alighted on his mother once more, it smoldered with a quiet fury. "Don't insult me by denying it outright," he said in a voice as taut as a tripwire, "or try deflecting with empty insults about Bryn and Alex's imagined mental state." He took a halting step forward, each footfall like the weight of an immense burden being lowered onto his shoulders. "Not after hearing that horrific revelation with my own 2 ears." Elaine issued a soft cluck of disapproval, patting his cheek in an almost maternal gesture, utterly at odds with the circumstances. "Oh, pish, you're working yourself into such an unnecessary state over some baseless accusations." "Enough!" Dominic bellowed with such abrupt ferocity that even I flinched. Elaine recoiled, shrinking back a few paces from this heretofore unseen side of her offspring. "My God," he muttered, raking a shaky hand through his hair. "I don't even know who you are anymore, if I ever really did. What kind of twisted, unforgivable thing did you do?" His mother seemed to wilt further and further with each lash of his furious denunciations. She shook her head almost plaintively, as if desperately beseeching him to somehow understand. I'd witnessed enough toxic dissolution of family dynamics to recognize the dispiriting signs. Suspicion calcifying into immovable factions, once unshakable allegiances fracturing under the weight of ugly revelations. My jaw clenched as memories of my own parents' acrimonious divorce came rushing back like a surging tide. The writing was on the wall, spelling an all-too-familiar and heart-rending endgame that had unfolded again and again throughout my lifetime. The disintegration of what had once been a family unit into splintered shards. One wounded soul cowering under the tearful accusation of his betrayer's own offspring. Another puffing up in impotent rage at having his hypocrisy shattered beyond any hope of reconstruction. There were simply no winners to be had in such minefields. Only depleted souls sifting through the rubble, desperate for a path out of their fractured reality. Then Alex shifted his stance slightly beside me, and my gaze instinctively followed suit. What I saw in his eyes stopped me cold. A piercing look of singular determination, glinting like a naked blade being unsheathed. Gone was the wounded filial heartbreak over yet another of his mother's callous deceptions. In its place smoldered the stoic resolve of a man implacably set on a harsh course, whatever heroic defiance or scorched earth lay in his path. Not for the first time, I marveled at the depth of steely backbone that my husband possessed when finally roused from complacency. Few had the privilege of witnessing this side of Alex, but those who did knew to stand well clear of the blast radius. He caught me staring and responded with an infinitesimal shake of his head, so slight as to be imperceptible to the others. Those eyes locked onto mine pointedly, silently conveying a message of unspoken solidarity. This ends now. No more games, no more retreats. And as I searched his unyielding countenance for any vestige of weakness or ambivalence, a new emotion welled up from my core, a grim sense of vengeful duty spreading like an ink blot over my heart. He was right. In that instant, I knew there was no redemption left to be salvaged, no shattered remnants worth preserving. Everything had been irrevocably shattered. The path forward led through an inescapable point of no return. Our family's sole path to justice lay in that scorched earth stretched before us like a gauntlet, beckoning with the promise of a peace that could only be bought with retribution. No matter what merciless destiny awaited us there, one thing was certain. Elaine Harrison's days of treacherous machinations against her own blood were officially over. One way or another, this generational saga of lies and betrayal would end with us. Come what may, karma would finally be delivered its due. The days following our cataclysmic family confrontation passed in a blur. Elaine shored up what tattered defenses remained, alternating between feigning indignant outrage over our baseless allegations and meek supplications begging for reconciliation. Alex and I were having none of it. We'd glimpsed the noxious truth festering at his family's core, and there was no dispelling that miasma through appeasement or half measures. Dominic had fallen into a brooding silence in the aftermath, lost in the disorienting realization that the idyllic childhood he'd known had been an artifice erected on lies and betrayal. I ached for him, recalling how it felt to have the naive blinders ripped away from my own eyes during my parents' divorce. For his part, Alex had slipped into what I'd coined his thermal exhaust port mode, cool, taciturn, and entirely focused on systematically dismantling the adversary piece by piece. It was unnervingly at odds with the laid-back charmer I'd fallen for. But in these circumstances, I couldn't deny a fierce sense of gratitude for this ruthless new side of him. When he informed me of his meticulously mapped stratagem, I shuddered, not at the calculated zealotry, but from the glacial understanding that animated it. We were well and truly past the point of civilized recourse with Elaine. The time for polite niceties had expired. The first salvo came 4 days after the fracturing, as I'd begun calling it. Alex invited Elaine to a cleared-the-air lunch, ostensibly to give her a chance at a truthful explanation for her appalling actions. Like a moth drawn to a flame, she readily accepted, clearly self-deluded enough to believe she could slither her way out of judgment through artful obfuscations and crocodile tears. Upon her arrival, she was ushered not to a private dining room as expected, but through a service corridor leading to a sealed conference room. There, assembled around a long table, sat a grim-faced tribunal. Alex, Dominic, and 6 other individuals whose stern visages I recognized from the various legal filings accumulated over the past several weeks of clandestine preparation. Elaine faltered, a flash of stunned unease momentarily shattering her poise before the courtly mask was repositioned. "What is the meaning of this unseemly gathering?" "Have a seat, Elaine," Alex stated flatly, gesturing towards a lone chair positioned before the panel. She bristled, drawing herself up in affronted hauteur. "I will do no such thing until someone—" "Mother?" Dominic's rumbled rebuke stopped her cold. He regarded her with undisguised umbrage, as if staring at something distasteful stuck to the bottom of his shoe. My heart clenched painfully at the depth of his barely restrained contempt. This time Elaine's mask slipped entirely, if only for an instant. The naked hurt and bewilderment etched across her features would have seemed pitiful if I didn't recognize it for what it truly was. The desperate lashing out of an inveterate manipulator being cut off from her supply lines. "Dominic," she croaked, reaching out a placating hand. "Surely you can't." "Just sit down, please," he ground out, unable to even maintain eye contact any longer. Something inside her seemed to wilt as the weight of her awful solitude finally registered. Sinking into the proffered chair, she cast a wary, wounded look around the assembled officiants, then finally settled on Alex's thunderous countenance with pleading resignation. I tensed at his answering look of harsh finality, gripping the edge of the table with white knuckles. For all the unforgivable slights and crushed hopes, there was no prepared salve to ease the pain of the impending denouement. Just a scalpel to excise the gangrenous limb poisoning our family once and for all. But we had come too far for last-second cold feet. Taking a steadying breath, he withdrew a thick manila folder containing what had to be hundreds of pages of documentation from across the table. You are being presented today with the full body of evidence detailing a years-long conspiracy to undermine your own family, he intoned in a tone of such solemn gravity it was as if rendering a judge's verdict rather than merely addressing his mother. Forgeries, defamations, willful obfuscation bordering on felonious acts against my wife and I, he continued, each word seemingly to strike Elaine with the weight of a sledgehammer blow, all in order to sabotage our efforts to conceive a child and secure your twisted control over this family and its bloodline. The proclamations kept coming, an inexorable avalanche of accusations, each infinitely more damning than the last, all couched in a meticulously cultivated portfolio of proof. And most damningly, each one was enumerated not just by Alex, but affirmed by a cadre of expert witnesses delineating chapter and verse of her elaborate offenses under oath. How I had underestimated his preparation, his ability to surgically dismantle her nefarious agenda through the path of maximum pain. The barrage was as merciless as it was inescapable, laying bare the wretched truth in all its lurid monstrosity. Elaine's villainy had metastasized into a cancer that would take down the entire family structure. And now, the scourge was being savagely exercised through its only course of treatment, absolute admission and recompense. There would be no more obfuscation, no more evasive parlor tricks or hollow deniability. Only the unvarnished truth and its inexorable consequences. Do you understand the depth of what you've done? Alex's voice lashed out as the final witness's proclamation hung in the air like a death knell. Elaine sat slumped, vacant and deflated, like a collapsed marionette whose strings had all been severed. Her haunted gaze flicked up, registering my face fleetingly before drifting back to Alex's accusatory glare. How could you do this to your own mother? She rasped, in a voice parched of all pretense. I expected Alex to spit out a contemptuous rebuttal reminding her of the sins that had precipitated this occasion, but instead, he merely exhaled through his nose with a sort of weary resignation. I'm not doing anything, he said with a chilling finality that seemed to splinter whatever remained of Elaine's bluster into powder. This is simply karma's hand finally being dealt. Then, in front of God and the assembled witnesses, Elaine Harrison, once imperious matriarch and merciless puppeteer of our family's fate, crumbled into silent, bitter weeping. And for all the satisfaction I'd imagined would accompany such a cathartic comeuppance, I felt nothing but a hollow, gaping sadness. Our vendetta had been achieved, yet at what terrible cost. Autumn's crisp breezes carried the bittersweet aroma of decaying leaves that fateful afternoon, an olfactory harbinger of change and renewal threading through the twilight air. Sometimes the simplest moments trigger the most profound revelations. For me, it happened as I cradled Mila in my arms, entranced by her cherubic features while she slumbered peacefully against my chest. The rhythmic rise and fall of her tiny back lulled me into a trance-like reverie punctuated only by the occasional bird-song from the backyard. I stroked the downy wisps of sable hair crowning her head, so dark and unruly, already mirroring my own unmanageable mane. A faint smile tugged at my lips as I committed every facet of her appearance to memory. Her rosebud lips, the faint dusting of freckles stippled across her elfin nose, even the little crease that furrowed between her eyebrows whenever she fussed. Most of all, those long-lashed eyes that had captivated me the instant they'd opened to gaze up at me in the delivery room. Not a muddy hazel like her father, but rather a striking peridot, the color of new spring grass. I tensed reflexively as a lock suddenly clicked downstairs. All it took was the faintest rustling from the hall to rouse Mila from her slumber, prompting a sleepy gurgle and soft coo. Within seconds, Alex's looming shadow materialized in the nursery's doorway, his face melting into a beatific grin. "Hey there, Munchkin." He crossed to us in 2 strides, bending to drop a tender kiss to Mila's crown. "Keeping your mama company while she holds down the fort? And what adventures did you get up to out in the big wide world today?" I teased, tipping my chin up to accept his lingering kiss. As he drew back, I couldn't help but bask in the glow of adoration warming his eyes. That same enamored look that never failed to reduce me to a giddy puddle even now, almost 9 years into our marriage. "Nothing too exciting," he murmured, settling onto the armchair beside us, while casually unbuttoning his collar. A soft chuckle rumbled in his chest as Mila instinctively swiveled her head towards the sound of his voice, already enthralled. "Just the usual media sales pitches and schmoozing clients over catered lunches," Alex continued with a wink in my direction. "But enough about me. This little peanut is clearly the star of the show today." He cocked his head to regard Mila's saucer-like gaze trained upon him. "You been behaving yourself for Mommy while I was away, Shortcake?" I chuckled mirthfully at his sing-song tone, the very picture of a besotted new father delighting in his offspring. When Mila's tiny hand emerged from beneath her swaddle to bat playfully at his face, Alex sputtered with unbridled elation. "Oh, I see how it is, Missy. Trying to rough up your old man right from the outset, huh?" We relished in Mila's ensuing giggles, joyous peals of laughter ringing out like silver bells in the peaceful hush of the nursery. In that instant, it was as if all the heartache and torment of the preceding years had been banished to a distant, cobwebbed recess, lost amid the simple rapture of being present with those dearest to you. As Mila's laughs subsided into intermittent coos, I caught Alex's eyes flitting towards the antique crib positioned in the corner. My breath caught for a moment as I followed his gaze, taking in the hand-carved detailing depicting leaping gazelles and swooping birds mid-flight. It was the same crib Alex's father had painstakingly restored and gifted to us. How many times had Alex run his fingers over those grooves, channeling his grief over whether we'd ever get the chance to use it for its intended purpose? Too many to count. In retrospect, our soaring hopes crushed again and again by one insidious force. As if in tune with my introspective turn, Alex's face grew solemn. Something indiscernible flickered behind his eyes before vanishing just as quickly. He rested his palm over my knee, giving it an affectionate squeeze. "Hard to believe it was less than a year ago that all the drama went down," he murmured in a hushed tone, as if not to disturb Mila's attention. My mind immediately jolted back to that fateful day in the conference room. Elaine's utter debasement as every scheme and conspiracy became an ineradicable part of the permanent record, carved into stone through testimony and documentation. How her papery, thin veneer of genteel grace and propriety had disintegrated under the weight of her wrongdoings being laid bare for all to witness. I swallowed thickly against the sudden lump in my throat. I'll never forget the look on her face that day, like the mask had finally shattered beyond any hope of repair. Alex's features tightened into a pained grimace I knew all too well, the echoes of a complicated, still unresolved relationship with his mother that seemed destined to haunt him for years to come. There were simply too many emotional fault lines fractured that day for any of us to achieve total closure. I did what needed to be done, for us and for the family, that he stated in a low, resolute tone that betrayed only the faintest quaver of lingering uncertainty. Still, I can't help but wonder if I was too heavy-handed. My free hand instinctively found his, our fingers interlacing. There would be no easy balm to heal those old emotional gouges, not entirely. But perhaps with time, and the all-consuming joy radiating out of our long-awaited miracle nestled between us, we could begin to rebuild anew on firmer ground. "You protected us and our future, Alex, against any threat, no matter how twisted or dark," I said, offering a reassuring squeeze. "That's all a good father ever needs to do." His grateful smile in response was enough to fill my heart to overflowing. Then Mila cooed softly again, drawing our rapt attention back to her cherubic mug like twin sunflowers turning towards the light. As I relished the sight of my beautiful daughter radiating undiluted joy and innocence, Milo's uncanny words from all those months ago reverberated in my mind's eye like a mantra, of triumph emerging from devastation, of light piercing the void. A daughter whose existence had only manifested through hard-won recompense for the very blackest betrayal. The living, breathing embodiment of karma's unbowed perseverance and the remarkable power of human resilience against even the most implacable darkness. No matter what convulsions had rocked our family's foundations to their core, in this tranquil moment of joy and renewal, we had prevailed. Scars would remain, of course, for all our catharsis, The past could never be truly expunged. But here at last was our chance to forge ahead anew. One single wondrous life offered up an opportunity, not just for a fresh chapter, but as the first radiant strains of an entirely new family saga, all thanks to that most delicate yet undaunted of human virtues, hope. The front yard was a disaster zone. Muddy tire tracks crisscrossed the once pristine lawn, leading to the completely obliterated flower garden in the corner. Shards of terracotta pots and uprooted plants were strewn everywhere, the vibrant blooms crushed under the weight of heavy truck tires. "What, in God's name?" I muttered, clutching the ragged shawl tighter around my shoulders as I stepped outside. The crisp autumn air carried the pungent scent of overturned soil and broken stems. Tyler came running up behind me, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. "Grandma, what happened? The garden." His voice trailed off as he surveyed the destruction. Before I could respond, the front door slammed open, and Jenna stormed out, her face flushed with anger. "You son of a bitch!" she screamed, marching across the ruined yard towards Kyle's idling pickup truck. "How could you do this?" Kyle leaned out the window, a cruel smirk twisting his features. "That's what you get for wasting time on stupid plants with my mother-in-law instead of being a proper wife." My heart sank as I realized the carnage was his doing. I wrapped my arm around Tyler's shoulders, pulling him close to shield him from the verbal onslaught. "You're seriously throwing a tantrum over some flowers?" Jenna's voice dripped with disbelief. "Those stupid plants made Tyler happy." "They were a project for him and my mom." "Your mom's an old biddy living off us like a freeloader," Kyle spat. "It's time she learned her place." Those cruel words lanced through me, dredging up memories of the countless sly digs and belittling comments he'd thrown my way since marrying Jenna. I'd endured it all to keep the peace, to not risk losing the family I had left. But seeing my beloved garden in ruins, witnessing the heartbreak on Tyler's face, something inside me snapped. I busied myself in the kitchen, trying to drown out the sound of Kyle's raised voice drifting in from the living room. Jenna had attempted to confront him about the garden incident, but as usual, he twisted everything around to make her feel like the one in the wrong. "If you didn't let that old hag fill your head with delusions about playing in the dirt, we wouldn't have these issues." Kyle's words sliced through the air like a whip. I flinched, my hands stilling over the dish I was drying. Tyler looked up from his spot at the kitchen table with worried eyes. "Don't listen to him, Grandma," he said softly. "The garden was special." Fighting back tears, I forced a smile. "I know, sweetie. Why don't you go upstairs and play for a bit? I'll call you down for dinner." Once he'd scampered off, I leaned back against the counter, pinching the bridge of my nose. The ache behind my eyes matched the tightness in my chest. How much more of Kyle's cruelty could I stomach? "You're damn right I let her delusions." Jenna's voice rang out, startling me. "That garden made Tyler so happy after everything, and you just had to ruin it like the petty, immature jerk you are." There was a pause, and I could picture Kyle's face twisting into that all-too-familiar sneer. "Well, if you'd bothered being a decent wife instead of chasing hobbies with Mom, maybe I wouldn't have to put you in your place." The sick implication in his words made my blood run cold. I clutched the dish towel tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Put me in my place?" Jenna echoed, her tone icy. "You arrogant, abusive asshole." A loud crash shattered the tense silence, followed by Jenna's cry of pain. I dropped the towel and raced into the living room to find her crumpled on the floor, a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. Kyle towered over her menacingly, his fist still clenched. "You'll speak to me with respect," he growled. "I put a roof over your head and your mom's. You'd both be on the street without me." White-hot rage blazed through me, burning away any fear or resignation I'd felt before. I grabbed a nearby vase, the curved glass cool against my palm. "Get away from my daughter," I snarled, hurling the vase with every ounce of strength I had. It struck Kyle square in the back of the head with a sickening thud. He crumpled to the floor unmoving as Jenna scrambled back with a shocked gasp. For a suspended moment, the only sound was our ragged breathing. Then Tyler's footsteps pounded down the stairs. "Mom? Grandma? What's going on?" Jenna shot me a wide-eyed look, her expression a swirl of fear, pain, and the first flickers of resolve. We both knew in that instant that things could never go back to how they were. The days after the vase incident were tense and volatile. Kyle had regained consciousness with a nasty gash and concussion, but true to form, he downplayed the violence he'd inflicted on Jenna. We tiptoed around him, never knowing when his fuse might ignite again. Tyler stuck close by my side, his usual bright demeanor dimmed by the heaviness that now permeated our home. One afternoon, I found him staring forlornly out the window at the ravaged garden plot. "I miss working on the flowers with you," he said in a small voice. My heart constricted at his crestfallen expression. Ruffling his hair, I tried to inject some lightness into my tone. "Me too, buddy. But you know what? We can start over. Make it even better than before." His eyes widened with cautious hope. "Really? But what about Kyle?" "Don't you worry about him." I leveled him with a resolute look. "This is our home, too. We're not going to let anyone take away the things that make us happy, okay?" Tyler nodded slowly, a tiny smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Okay, Grandma, I trust you." Those simple words unlocked something fierce and protective inside me. For too long, I'd let Kyle's venom slowly drain the joy from our lives out of some misguided attempt at keeping the peace. But seeing the garden he'd so callously destroyed reawakened my passion. The same passion I wanted to pass on to Tyler. The next morning, while Jenna was out running errands and Kyle was still fast asleep, I gathered some gardening tools and led Tyler outside to the wreckage. He watched with rapt attention as I mapped out a new layout, explaining how we'd rebuild the garden beds from scratch. "We'll make it bigger and better," I promised, "with all your favorite flowers and some new ones too." Tyler's face lit up with excitement, and we got to work tilling the soil and gathering supplies from the shed. By the time Jenna returned, we had the first bed prepped and ready for planting. "Mom, look!" Tyler bounded over, practically vibrating with pride. "Grandma and I are making a new garden." Jenna's brows knit together as she took in the scene, but her expression quickly softened into one of weary resignation. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want any more problems." "Don't worry, dear." I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "This is our home. We're taking it back, one flower at a time." Over the next few weeks, Tyler and I spent every spare moment nurturing our garden revival. With each seedling that sprouted and bloomed, I could see his self-assurance growing right alongside the plants, and Jenna, after her initial reservations, seemed to draw strength from our small oasis of defiance as well. Kyle, of course, doubled down on his sneers and taunts about our stupid hobby. But his words carried less venom, deflecting off the newfound sense of purpose that buoyed us. This garden was more than just flowers. It was a reclaiming of our space, our happiness. And even Kyle's cruelty couldn't uproot that. The garden was really taking shape now, the vibrant blooms a colorful rebuke to Kyle's attempts to grind us down. Tyler spent hours happily tending to the plants alongside me, his small hands surprisingly deft with the pruning shears and trowel. "This sunflower is going to be even taller than you soon, Grandma," he exclaimed one sunny afternoon, gently adjusting the thick green stalk. I chuckled, brushing a bead of sweat from my brow. "Is that so? Well, I can't have my favorite gardener showing me up." A familiar derisive snort made us both stiffen. Kyle sauntered over, already clutching a beer despite it being barely noon. "Waste of time and money, if you ask me," he said, sneering at the lush garden beds. "All that work for some dumb plants." Tyler's shoulders slumped, and I felt a flare of protective anger. Before I could retort, though, he pressed on with a mocking tone. "But I guess that's all an old lady's good for these days, huh?" He fixed me with a cruel smirk. "Digging around in the dirt with the grandkids." The emasculating implication hung heavy in the air. I drew myself up, refusing to let him rattle me like he so clearly wanted. "At least I'm doing something productive and bringing joy," I said evenly. "Which is more than I can say for you." Kyle's eyes flashed with rage, but I held his gaze, unflinching. After a tense moment, he scoffed and turned on his heel, storming back into the house and letting the screen door slam behind him. "Don't listen to him, Tyler," I said gently, pulling the boy into a one-armed hug. "He's just trying to be mean because he doesn't understand." Tyler nodded, but his shoulders remained tense as he turned back to the garden with a troubled frown. Over the next few days, Kyle's barbs and taunts increased in frequency. It's like he was trying to grind us down through sheer repetition. Jenna finally confronted him one evening after he'd made another snide comment about the stupid hobby within Tyler's earshot. "Why do you have to be such a jerk about this?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "It makes Tyler happy, and it's not hurting anyone." Kyle's lip curled in an ugly sneer. "Oh, what? You're taking their side now? Typical woman, falling for dumb emotional crap." The sexist remark hung in the air, scathing and vile. Jenna's face flushed an angry crimson. "How dare you, you arrogant, backwards pig!" In a flash, Kyle was on his feet, towering over her in a way that made my heart pound. "You'll watch your tone when you speak to me," he growled, fists clenching. I instinctively moved to put myself between them, but Jenna held up a hand to stop me. There was a new fire blazing in her eyes, one I'd never seen before. "Or what?" she challenged, her voice low but unwavering. "You'll hit me again like last time? Go ahead and try it, you pathetic bully." Kyle looked taken aback by her sudden defiance. His gaze flicked briefly to me before settling back on Jenna with a sneer. "Whatever, have fun playing with your stupid flowers." He stormed off towards the den, but the air was thick with a sense that something had shifted. As Jenna met my eyes, I saw the first flickers of resolve hardening her expression. No more placating. No more walking on eggshells around his toxic temper. We were taking a stand, one bloom at a time. The garden had become a vibrant oasis amidst the escalating tension in our household. Each morning, Tyler and I would slip outside to tend the beds, finding solace in the simple act of nurturing new growth. "The zinnias are finally blooming," he exclaimed one day, carefully snipping a few stems to bring inside. I smiled, admiring the jewel-toned petals. "They're beautiful. Why don't you put them in a vase for the kitchen table?" His face lit up at the suggestion. As he scampered off, I settled onto the small bench Kyle had begrudgingly assembled months ago, brushing my fingers over the soft velvet of a peony bloom. The screen door banged open, shattering the tranquil moment. Kyle stomped out, his expression thunderous as he made a beeline for me. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" he snarled, looming over me. "Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." I tensed, bracing for another round of his verbal abuse. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb." He jabbed a meaty finger towards the garden, filling the kid's head with this gardening crap, making him soft. My jaw clenched at the implication. Tyler's not soft. He's caring and in touch with nature, something you could learn from. Kyle's face mottled with rage. "You'll keep your trap shut about how I raise my son, you hear me?" The possessive words made my blood run cold. I opened my mouth to retort, but a small voice piped up from behind. "I'm not your son." We both whirled to see Tyler standing in the doorway, knuckles white around the vase of zinnias. His expression was uncharacteristically steely as he fixed Kyle with an icy glare. "You're just my mom's mean husband, and you're not going to talk to my grandma like that anymore." Kyle looked momentarily taken aback by the boy's vehemence, before his face contorted in an ugly sneer. "You need to learn some respect, kid." "No, you need to learn some respect." Tyler's voice rose to a shout, startling us all. "Grandma's garden is amazing, and you're just a big jerk who doesn't get it." With that, he flung the vase with all his might, shattering it at Kyle's feet in a kaleidoscope of water, glass, and vibrant petals. Kyle sputtered, staring down at the shards in disbelief. "Why, you little—" "Kyle, that's enough!" Jenna's voice rang out as she hurried outside, putting herself between her husband and son. "You will not speak to him that way, do you understand me?" Kyle opened his mouth, undoubtedly to spit more venom, but seemed to think better of it at the look on Jenna's face. His hands clenched and unclenched as he struggled to rein in his temper. "Fine," he bit out at last. "Do whatever you want. Waste your time playing in the dirt." He turned on his heel and stormed back inside, the screen door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. An uneasy silence fell over the yard, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the warm breeze. Jenna let out a shaky breath, pulling Tyler into a fierce hug. "It's okay, baby. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself and Grandma." Tyler clung to her, his earlier bravado melting into quiet sniffles. I laid a hand on his back, marveling at his display of courage in the face of Kyle's aggression. As mother and son held each other, I caught Jenna's eye over Tyler's bowed head. A silent resolution passed between us, hardening my resolve. No more placating the bully, no more walking on eggshells. It was time to uproot the poison from our family once and for all, by whatever means necessary. The days following Tyler's outburst were marked by a tense, uneasy truce. Kyle avoided us, skulking around the house with a perpetual scowl. Jenna insisted we leave him be to simmer down, but I could see the newfound glint of determination in her eyes. She was done making excuses for his behavior. Tyler and I threw ourselves into the garden, using the meditative act of tending the plants as an escape from the strain. One crisp autumn afternoon, we were harvesting the last of the tomato crop when Kyle's raised voice shattered the quiet. "You're delusional if you think I'm going to keep bankrolling this ridiculous hobby." My head snapped up at the sound of his boots crunching across the yard towards us. Tyler shrank back, his eyes wide with apprehension. "It's okay," I murmured, squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. "Just stay calm." Kyle stormed up, his face mottled with rage. "You two better start packing up this mess. I'm done wasting money on dirt and plants." "You don't get to make those decisions," I said, keeping my tone even as I rose to face him. "This is our home, too." His beady eyes narrowed into slits. "It's my house that I paid for. I'll do what I want. Actually, it's my house, too." Jenna's voice rang out as she emerged from the back door. "My name's on the deed, same as yours." Kyle whirled on her with an ugly snarl. "You saying you'll defy me, woman? After everything I've given you?" The sexist implication hung in the air like a lead weight. Jenna's chin lifted defiantly. "I'm saying this is over, Kyle. I'm done with your tantrums and abuse. You ungrateful bee." The slur seemed to trigger something primal in Kyle. With a feral roar, he lunged towards Jenna, fists raised. She cried out, stumbling back. Before I could even process what was happening, Tyler darted forward and planted himself between them. "Don't you touch her!" Kyle skidded to a halt, his eyes widening in shock. Tyler stood his ground, trembling but resolute. "You need to leave," the boy said, his voice quavering but firm. "Get out of our house and don't come back." A muscle twitched in Kyle's clenched jaw as he stared the child down. For a horrible, suspended moment, I feared he might strike out again. Then his expression contorted into a sneer of pure loathing. "Fine. You can have this, shithole." He turned and stomped back towards the detached garage, yanking the door open with savage force. I watched in numb shock as he climbed into his idling truck, peeling out of the driveway in a spray of gravel. We stood rooted to the yard, the rumble of the engine fading into tense silence. Jenna was the first to move, scooping Tyler up and hugging him fiercely. "That was so brave, baby," she whispered, planting kisses on his hair. "I'm so proud of you." Tyler clung to her, his small body trembling with residual adrenaline. As I moved to embrace them both, Kyle's truck suddenly roared back into view. My heart stuttered in my chest as he slammed it into park, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unhinged fury. Without a word, he mashed his foot down on the accelerator. The truck surged forward in a cloud of exhaust and spinning tires, demolishing the raised garden beds in its path. I could only watch in numb horror as months of hard work, of love and healing, was obliterated in mere seconds beneath the churning wheels. When the engine finally cut out, the only sound was Jenna's anguished sobs mingling with Tyler's cries. Kyle threw open the truck door and spat a glob of phlegm onto the ruined flower beds. "There's your stupid garden, you miserable old hag," he snarled at me. "I hope it was worth it." Then, with one last contemptuous glare, he peeled out of the driveway and disappeared around the corner. In the aftermath, the three of us could only cling to each other amidst the devastation, raw grief and rage mingling into a potent, bitter cocktail. He'd taken things too far this time, and he was going to pay dearly for it. The aftermath of Kyle's rampage was a blur of police reports, terse statements, and Jenna's heart-wrenching sobs. Tyler clung to me, his small frame racked with tremors as the reality of his stepfather's cruelty sank in. "Why did he do that, Grandma?" he kept asking in a tiny, broken voice. The garden was so beautiful. I could only hold him close, anger and grief warring within me. That garden had represented so much more than flowers. It was a reclamation of our home, our happiness, and Kyle had obliterated it out of sheer spite. The police officers who responded were professional but clearly skeptical of the whole angry husband-destroying garden story. I could see the dismissive looks as Jenna rehashed Kyle's escalating verbal abuse and controlling behavior. Just another domestic dispute, their expressions seemed to say. We'll file a report, but good luck getting anything to stick. It was a harsh reminder that the system was stacked against victims like us. Kyle was a wealthy, successful businessman, the type who could easily manipulate the narrative to make himself the aggrieved party. As the officers took their notes and departed, Jenna slumped onto the couch, cradling her head in her hands. "What am I going to do?" she whispered, sounding utterly defeated. "He'll just keep coming after us." A righteous fury blazed within me at her broken tone. I'd failed as a mother, allowing this poisonous man to infiltrate our family and erode my daughter's sense of self-worth. But I wouldn't fail as a grandmother. Crossing the room, I knelt in front of Jenna and grasped her hands firmly. "Listen to me. You're going to leave that bastard and take him for everything he's worth." She blinked at me, eyes widening slightly. "Mom, I can't. He'll fight me on it and drag it through the courts for years, with his lawyers and money." "Which is exactly why you have to do it." I gave her hands an emphatic squeeze. "He may have all the resources, but we have right on our side. What he did, destroying our home out of sheer malice, that's inexcusable." Jenna wavered, insecurity flickering across her features. "You really think I can win against him?" "I know you can." I lifted her chin, holding her gaze intently. "You're my daughter, strong, resilient, and so much tougher than that petty bully could ever comprehend. It's time to show that bastard exactly what we're made of." For a long moment she searched my face, something fragile kindling in her eyes. Then finally, her expression hardened into steely determination. "You're right," she said, her voice low but resolute. "I'm done letting him control me, done subjecting Tyler to his toxic crap. It's time to burn that bridge and salt the earth." I pulled her into a fierce embrace, fresh tears of pride and hope stinging my eyes. "That's my girl. We'll take him for everything. The house, his assets, every last penny. And when it's all over," she whispered fiercely, "we build a garden twice as beautiful in the rubble of what he destroyed, a garden just for us." Tyler, who'd been watching silently, scrambled up to join our hug, his small arms winding tightly around us both. United at last, a formidable front against the cruelty that had nearly broken us. That night, as I stood vigil over the decimated garden beds, I could almost taste the promise of justice on the crisp autumn breeze. Kyle's path of destruction would lead to his downfall, the ultimate cosmic karma for his arrogance and hatred. We would emerge from his shadow, battered but unbroken, rising like the perennials that bloomed more vibrant each spring. And in the end, we would be the ones blanketing the wreckage with new life, while he withered amongst the ashes of his own making. The divorce proceedings were every bit as vicious and drawn out as we'd anticipated. True to form, Kyle fought tooth and nail, his high-priced legal team flinging accusations and attempting to discredit us at every turn. "My client is the victim of a vindictive woman looking to take advantage," his smarmy lawyer sneered during one particularly heated deposition. "The supposed abuse is a fabrication to ensure a larger settlement." Jenna's hands clenched into white-knuckled fists on the table, but she kept her composure, refusing to rise to the bait. I couldn't help but swell with pride at her poise. "If I were making it up for monetary gain, why did I wait until after the garden incident?" she asked evenly. "I tried for months to make the marriage work despite his cruelty." The lawyer's oily smirk faltered slightly, but he pressed on. "And this garden incident, an overblown tantrum certainly, but hardly grounds for the extreme financial demands you're making. He destroyed months of my mother and child's hard work and joy out of pure spite." Jenna fired back, her voice hardening. "If that's not emotional cruelty and property damage, I don't know what is." As the proceedings dragged on, every scathing accusation and bad faith argument only stoked the simmering fury in my chest. Kyle's arrogance and disregard for us as human beings knew no bounds. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of bitter legal combat, the judge rendered his decision. I'll never forget the look of impotent rage on Kyle's face as the settlement terms were read out, a number that would have most people set for multiple lifetimes. "This is a travesty," he erupted as soon as the gavel struck. "You're robbing me blind based on lies and embellishments." "Watch your tone," the judge warned, his expression severe. "I've reviewed all evidence and testimony thoroughly. The punitive damages for your vindictive and abusive actions are more than warranted." Kyle opened his mouth, no doubt to unleash another stream of vitriol, but seemed to think better of it. With a visible effort, he clenched his jaw and turned on his heel, storming out of the courtroom. In the aftermath, I could scarcely believe the enormity of our victory. Not just the monetary settlement, though that would ensure Jenna and Tyler never had to rely on anyone again. More importantly, we'd stood our ground against Kyle's cruelty and prevailed. As we made our way to the car, giddy with hard-won relief, Tyler tugged on my sleeve. "Does this mean Kyle can never come back?" he asked, his eyes wide and hopeful. I pulled him into a fierce hug, blinking back grateful tears. "It means we never have to see that mean old bully again, sweetie. We're finally free of him for good." Jenna looped an arm around us both, her face alight with the first true unburdened smile I'd seen in years. "Mom's right. It's just going to be us three from now on, a fresh start." Over the next few weeks, we settled into our new reality with a sense of giddy disbelief. Jenna immediately put in her notice at the job Kyle had insisted she keep, ready to be a full-time mom again. And true to her word, one of the first things we did was rip out what remained of the ravaged garden. "We're starting over from scratch," I told Tyler as we surveyed the bare patch of earth, planting all new life where he tried to destroy it. The boy's face split into a gap-toothed grin, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. "Exactly," I ruffled his hair with a chuckle. "Our garden will be bigger, brighter, and more beautiful than ever before. And this time, no one can take that away from us." As we set about mapping out the new beds and selecting seeds, I couldn't help but feel a sense of cosmic justice. While we were nurturing new growth from the devastation, Kyle was left bitter and broken, his wealth and arrogance reduced to rubble. In the end, his cruelty had wrought his downfall, leaving nothing but a scorched path of ruin in its wake. But for us, it was the dawn of a new beginning, a vibrant garden flourishing in the ashes, reclaimed and renewed. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at the photo on Adam's phone. The teenage girl's sullen expression and dark makeup were unmistakable. It was Jenna, one of my most challenging tutoring students this year. Adam sighed deeply. "That's my daughter, Amelia. She'll be coming to live with us next week." My heart pounded as realization set in. Amelia was the daughter he had briefly mentioned from a youthful fling before we met. But to have her show up now, after 16 years? This troubled girl was going to be under our roof? "Why the sudden change?" I asked carefully, my mind spinning. Adam rarely spoke of his past indiscretions. He shrugged. "Her mother's being deployed overseas for work. Amelia didn't want to move, so she'll stay with us." I studied his impassive expression, suspecting he wasn't being fully truthful. Still, this was a bombshell, a secret daughter upending our peaceful life together. Over the next few days, I watched Adam transform our guest room into a teenage girl's bedroom, painting the walls purple and setting up a desk for studying. I wondered if he was trying to atone for his past negligence as a father. When Amelia, or Jenna as I knew her, arrived, it was even more bizarre seeing her defiant sneer in our hallway. In my tutoring sessions, she had been constantly disruptive, with a concerning lack of effort. "Hey," she muttered flatly as Adam introduced us. I could already sense the challenges ahead with such a problematic houseguest. That first night, I overheard Amelia on a call in her room. "This place is a prison, Mom. I don't know how long I can keep up this stupid act." My stomach dropped. I had suspected Jenna came from a troubled home, but could she and her mother be putting on an elaborate con? Using Adam's own guilt against him for their gain? I knew I would have to tread very carefully. Over the next few weeks, Amelia's presence became increasingly disruptive. Her rude comments and blatant disregard for our household rules quickly frayed my nerves. Adam, however, seemed oblivious, or perhaps unwilling to address her behavior. "She's just a teenager finding her way," he'd say with a dismissive wave whenever I brought up her latest transgression. "Give her some space." Space? The girl was slowly taking over our home like an ill-mannered squatter. Her rooms were constantly trashed, she'd leave messes everywhere, and I'd catch her sneaking out at night multiple times. "Amelia, we need to talk about your actions," I stated firmly one morning after discovering she had stolen my good bottle of bourbon. "This cannot continue." She rolled her eyes defiantly. "Yeah, whatever. You're not my real mom." "Maybe not, but I deserve basic respect in this house," I shot back, my temper flaring. Your father works hard to give you a home here. Oh, Daddy works so hard, does he? She sneered. For whose benefit, I wonder? The insinuation hung heavy in the air. I opened my mouth to retort, but Adam stepped between us. That's enough, both of you. Amelia, go to your room. As she stormed off, I turned to Adam incredulously. You're actually taking her side? After that attitude? He avoided my gaze. She's just a kid, Claire. Lashing out is normal for her age. So her blatant disrespect is okay? You're making excuses. We argued heatedly until I finally gave up, retreating to the bedroom in fuming silence. This was not the life I had envisioned when I married Adam. A few days later, I made a discovery that turned my world upside down. While using Adam's computer for work, I noticed his email was still logged in. Telling myself I shouldn't snoop, I started to close it, but a particular name in his inbox caught my eye. Jessica. My heart raced as I opened the email thread. The conversations dated back months before Amelia's arrival. Jessica was apparently her mother, and the emails detailed their plan for Amelia to move in and make herself at home with us. It was all a scheme, a ploy to insert their way into our lives, and judging by the frequent mentions of getting what's owed, likely for financial gain. I felt sick realizing Adam had been lying to me this entire time. Worse, Amelia, Jenna, was fully complicit. This was my own troubled student, now living under my roof to help fleece her own father. The deception made my head spin. I spent the next few days quietly observing Amelia's behaviors through new eyes. The sneaking out, the rudeness, it was all an act to aggravate Adam and destabilize our household. A long con that my husband had agreed to, for reasons I didn't yet understand. As much as it pained me, I knew I needed to play along for now and gather more evidence. To take them down, I needed to be 2 steps ahead in their own twisted game. Amelia's presence became increasingly unbearable after my discovery of the emails. Knowing she was actively conning us, her every action took on new insidious meaning. The smirks, the sass, the blatant disregard for our house rules, it was all choreographed to undermine Adam and destabilize our home life. You left your crap all over the living room again, I stated coldly one evening as she sauntered in from another late night out. She shrugged, popping a piece of gum loudly. So, this is our home, not a flop house. Show some respect. Respect, she laughed mockingly. That's rich coming from you. I bristled, fighting to keep my anger in check. What's that supposed to mean? Like you even know the first thing about me or my life. Maybe if you acted like a normal human being instead of a rude, entitled brat. Hey, Adam's voice cut me off as he entered. What's going on here? Just dealing with your daughter's wonderful attitude as usual, I snapped. Amelia smirked. Daddy's little princess has a problem following rules, I guess. Don't start, I warned, but Adam raised his hands placatingly. Okay. Let's all just take a deep breath, all right? I shook my head in disgust, storming off to the kitchen, as if his calm negotiations would stop this act they were putting on. The worst part? I couldn't even confide in Adam about my discoveries. He was clearly complicit in this scheme with Amelia's mother Jessica, revealing what I knew could spook them into accelerating their con. No, I needed to bide my time and continue gathering evidence to expose their plot. Starting with finding out exactly what getting what's owed meant in those emails. Over the next few weeks, I scoured Adam's computer and files whenever he was away at work, searching for any paperwork or communications that could shed light on Jessica's motivation. What I found made my blood boil. Years ago, when Adam was briefly involved with Jessica, he had gotten her pregnant with Amelia. Instead of taking responsibility, he paid Jessica a lump sum of money to walk away and terminate the pregnancy. Except she hadn't. And now, years later, they were back to extract even more from him through this deception. I felt physically ill realizing the depths of Adam's past betrayal and how Amelia was being used as a pawn for her mother's revenge. This was no longer just a con. It was a vicious, calculated scheme to make my own husband miserable. When Adam returned home that evening, I could barely look at him. He must have sensed my anger because he pulled me aside with forced cheerfulness. Hey, what's going on? You've seemed really tense lately. I met his gaze levelly. Have I? Gee, I wonder why that could be, with your lying, conniving daughter making our lives hell. His expression faltered. Claire, I know she's been difficult, but she's my child. Your child that you once wanted terminated. I hissed, no longer caring about playing dumb. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Jessica's revenge for you trying to make Amelia disappear. Adam's face drained of color. For a long moment he could only sputter uselessly. I shook my head in disgust. I can't even look at you right now. Turning, I headed upstairs, my mind racing with the next steps. With Adam's secret out in the open, there was no more holding back. It was time to dismantle this sick little family con once and for all, by whatever means necessary. With Adam's past deception now exposed, the tension in our household was thick enough to cut with a knife. Amelia continued her calculated misbehavior, no doubt trying to further destabilize our home on her mother's behalf. I, however, was done playing their game. If Adam was too cowardly or complicit to put a stop to this, I would take matters into my own hands. We need to talk, I stated firmly, cornering Amelia in the kitchen one morning before she could slink back to her room. She rolled her eyes. About what? About you and your mother's little scheme to extort money from my husband. Her bravado faltered for just a moment before the sneer returned. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb. I know all about the emails between your mom and Adam, plotting for you to move in and make yourself at home here. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low and menacing. Using his own daughter as a pawn to get what's owed? That's low, even for him. Panic flickered across her face before the mask of indifference returned. You're crazy, lady. I'm just living here, that's all. After he paid your mother to have you terminated as a pregnancy? That struck a nerve. Amelia's fists clenched, her eyes burning with hatred I hadn't seen before. That's a lie. My mom wouldn't. Wake up, I snapped, feeling perverse satisfaction at her shock. Your mom's just using you as a tool for payback over Adam's past choices. This is all one big con. Amelia opened her mouth to respond, but a new voice cut through the tension. That's enough. Adam stood in the doorway, fury etched across his features as he pulled Amelia protectively behind him. You've gone too far, Claire. Making up lies to turn my own daughter against me? I laughed derisively. That's rich, coming from you. I have the emails, Adam. All the proof of your pathetic deal with Jessica to make Amelia disappear years ago. That's what this has all been about, her revenge, using your own flesh and blood. For once, Adam seemed at a loss for excuses or placating words. Amelia stared between us, her expression unreadable. Well, I pressed, aren't you going to admit to your lies, your betrayal of me, of your own family? Adam's jaw tightened, and I wondered if he might finally come clean. If this would be the moment where, Get out! The quiet venom in his voice stopped me cold. What? You heard me, he stated, wrapping an arm around Amelia. After the cruel, vindictive lies you've spewed, I want you out of this house, tonight. My heart dropped to my stomach as the words hit like a physical blow. Adam, you can't be serious. This is my home, too. Not anymore, he said with chilling finality. Not after you've made it so toxic with your deranged accusations against my daughter. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He was choosing them, the ones deceiving and manipulating him, over his own wife. Tears stung my eyes as I looked between their impassive faces. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had before. Swallowing hard, I met Adam's gaze with as much dignity as I could muster. You'll see the truth soon enough, and when you do... I shook my head slowly. Well, don't come crawling back to me. Turning, I headed upstairs to pack what few belongings I could quickly gather. My home, my life, was crumbling around me, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. If Adam was too blinded by familial bonds to see the truth, I would make him open his eyes. Whatever it took, I would expose this twisted scheme and make them pay. The real battle was only just beginning. After Adam kicked me out, I spent a few aimless weeks crashing with friends, my mind spinning over how to expose Jessica and Amelia's twisted scheme. I couldn't simply walk away, not with that vile mother using her own daughter as a pawn against my husband. Eventually, I settled into a small rental apartment, using what little savings I had to get by. More importantly, it gave me a base to operate my counterattack and gather indisputable proof of their con. My first move was to make copies of the damning emails between Adam and Jessica that I had discovered. I also began meticulously documenting every instance of Amelia's calculated misbehavior at home to build a case against her. Next, I hired a private investigator to start digging into Jessica's background. Within weeks, they uncovered a trail of shady activities, unpaid loans, evictions, and a string of wealthy ex-boyfriends she had burned. This was clearly a long pattern of deception on her part. Armed with this new evidence, I requested a sit-down with Adam at a neutral location, a coffee shop near his office. He arrived looking haggard and defensive. "What is this about, Claire? I have nothing left to say to you after your unforgivable behavior." I slid the thick manila envelope across the table. "This is about the truth, the whole truth about your lies, and the con your ex and daughter have been pulling on you." Adam hesitated before flipping open the envelope, his brow furrowing as he thumbed through the documents inside. The email transcripts, the PI's report on Jessica, my logs of Amelia's troublemaking. As the weight of the evidence became undeniable, I could see the conflict playing across his face. Part of him still wanted to cling to deluded denial, but the proof was far too compelling. You went this far?" he finally said, seemingly unsure whether to be awed or outraged. I leaned forward intently. "I had to, Adam. After the way you turned on me and kicked me out over their lies, you left me no choice but to take this into my own hands." Shame flickered across his features, but he remained defensive. "Even if some of this is true, Amelia is still my blood. You don't understand how important that is." I shook my head sadly. "You're right, I don't, because you never gave me the chance to understand by being honest with me from the start." My voice had risen, drawing glances from nearby tables. I took a breath to rein in my anger. "Look at the evidence, Adam. Look at what kind of person Jessica really is, using your own child to try to fleece you. Where does her manipulation end? How much further will she go?" He didn't respond, his jaw tensing as he avoided my stare. For a long moment, an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse murmur. "You're right. I should have been upfront with you about Amelia from the beginning. I didn't want to risk losing you over my past mistakes." "Well, you did lose me," I stated flatly. "The question now is, are you going to continue letting them use and manipulate you? Or are you finally going to stand up and be a man?" Adam's shoulders slumped, all the fight seeming to go out of him. He looked utterly defeated in that moment, a broken man slowly coming to grips with the reality he had avoided for too long. "I don't know," he muttered, staring down at the envelope's damning contents. "I just don't know anymore." Pushing back from the table, I stood to leave. He didn't try to stop me. "Think it over," I said quietly. "And remember, the truth won't go away, no matter how hard you try to ignore it." As I walked away, I felt a surprising sense of calm determination. For too long I had been on the defensive against Adam and his deceptive family, but now the battlefield was level. The weapons of truth and justice were finally on my side. It was time to go on the attack. Several tense weeks went by without a word from Adam after our confrontation. I tried not to get my hopes up that he was finally seeing the light about Jessica and Amelia's twisted scheme. He had been too deep in denial for too long. Then one evening my phone rang, Adam asking if we could meet again to talk. I agreed, bracing myself for whatever excuses or rationalization he might throw my way next. When we met at a quiet bar, however, Adam looked utterly despondent. Broken, even. "You were right," he stated flatly after we sat down. "About all of it. Jessica, Amelia, the lies, the manipulation. It was all one big con." Despite the vindication, I felt no joy or satisfaction as I studied his haggard expression. "How did you finally realize?" I asked quietly. Adam dragged a hand down his face, suddenly looking decades older. "After you showed me all that evidence, I couldn't keep deluding myself anymore. I started digging deeper into Jessica's past like you did, and—" He shook his head slowly. "Let's just say she has a pattern of using men to bankroll her lifestyle, then discarding them once she's bled them dry." "So you were just the next target for her and Amelia to sink their claws into," I murmured. "Exactly. And I was the perfect mark, a successful businessman with assets, blinded by my own guilt and desire to play father to the daughter I abandoned." A rueful, self-loathing laugh escaped his lips. "She played me like a damn fiddle from the start." "And Amelia?" I pressed. "What did she have to say when you confronted her about the truth?" A flicker of anguish passed over Adam's features. "At first she denied it, calling me crazy and paranoid like they had you. but once I showed her ironclad proof of her mother's patterns, she just went cold and silent. He slowly shook his head. My own daughter? Conspiring with her mother to take me for everything I have. All these years, she never gave a damn about having me in her life. I was just a mean to an end for their sick game. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness seeing the dejected man before me, forced to confront such an ugly truth about his own flesh and blood. I'm so sorry, Adam, I said quietly. As much as they hurt and betrayed me too, I can't imagine the pain of having your own child turned so monstrous. A hollow laugh escaped his lips. Well, we reap what we sow, don't we? This is the price for the lies and cowardice in my past, running away from problems instead of facing them. I didn't disagree. Adam's refusal to take responsibility for his past mistakes had opened the door for Jessica to slither back into our lives with her poisonous agenda. So what now? I asked carefully. What are you going to do about them? Adam's jaw tightened, a flash of the strong man I'd married briefly returning to his eyes. The only thing I can do. Cut them off for good, once and for all. No more money, no more enabling their sick need for revenge. He looked up at me intently. And I need your help, Claire. You're the only one who had my back through this nightmare, even when I was too blind to see it. I considered for a moment, part of me still stung by the cruel way he had turned on me in siding with Jessica and Amelia before. But seeing this broken man, reaching for a last shred of redemption, I knew I couldn't turn away. Slowly, I reached across the table and grasped his hand, squeezing it firmly. You've got it. We'll take them down together for good this time. No more lies, no more running. It's time they finally face the consequences. Adam's eyes glistened with a mixture of shame, relief, and renewed determination. He simply nodded. The reckoning was coming. And this time, nothing would stop justice from being served. With Adam finally seeing the truth about Jessica and Amelia's twisted con, we wasted no time springing into action. First order of business, cutting off their access to his money and assets before they could bleed him dry. We met with Adam's lawyers and accountants, laying out the evidence I had gathered so they could erect a legal fortress protecting his finances. Bank accounts were frozen, investment portfolios locked, even his personal credit cards canceled. If those two vipers thought they were going to continue living off my husband's dime, they had another thing coming. Next, we moved to separate Amelia from her enabler mother's influence. Adam contacted Jessica, demanding she come to the house to collect her daughter's belongings immediately. When she arrived with Amelia in tow, I could practically see the dollar signs in their eyes. What's going on, Adam? Jessica simpered, all fake concern. Why are you kicking my baby out? Can it? I snapped before Adam could respond. We know all about your little scheme to fleece him using Amelia. The con is over. Jessica's sugary facade quickly melted into a sneer. You've got no proof of anything, just more of your deranged ramblings, Claire. Smirking, I tossed a thick manila envelope at her feet, the contents spilling out, copies of emails, financial records, the PI's report laying out her patterns of deceit. Oh, I've got proof all right. Reams of it. Her eyes widened as she scrambled to scoop up the papers, realization dawning. She turned to Amelia desperately. Baby, this crazy bye. Don't talk to her. Adam's voice boomed. Surprising us all, you've both done enough here. More than enough. For once, Amelia seemed cowed by her father's intensity, shrinking back slightly. Jessica, however, rallied in defiant anger. You're making a big mistake, Adam, after everything I've done for you, letting you be part of Amelia's life. Letting me? Adam shook his head in disgust. Using her as a pawn to try to fleece me over past mistakes? That's not any kind of favor. It's reprehensible, and it stops now. You can't do this, Jessica sputtered, panic creeping in as she realized her con was crumbling. We're family. No, Adam stated with chilling finality. You're not my family anymore. Just another mistake to finally put in the past. Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it, shooting me a look of pure venom before storming out the door, Amelia slinking behind her. As the door slammed, I let out a long breath, adrenaline still coursing through me from the confrontation. Adam simply stood motionless, his expression unreadable. Well, they're out of our lives for good now, I ventured carefully. You did the right thing, Adam. He gave a slow nod, still seeming lost in thought. Maybe. Maybe not. All I know is I can't let that toxicity continue poisoning everything I hold dear. I studied him for a long moment before speaking again. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for facing this head-on. Not many men would have had the strength. Adam's gaze finally met mine, stripped of the bravado and denial that had blinded him for so long. I only wish I had that strength sooner, before it all spiraled so far out of control. We stood in silence for a long stretch, the weight of the situation, of all the hurt and betrayal, hanging heavy between us. So much had been lost on the way to this point. Finally, Adam seemed to shake himself from his reverie. Well, I suppose I should start putting my life back together. Try to salvage what I can. I gave him a sad smile. For both our sakes, I hope you can. As I watched him turn and head upstairs, I felt an unexpected pang of melancholy. His entire world had been shattered upon the rocks of lies and deception. But in that wreckage, there was a chance to finally rebuild something stronger. Whether that new life would involve me, however, remained to be seen. For tonight, I simply felt a sense of relief that the worst was over. The con had failed, and sometimes just surviving is victory enough. In the aftermath of finally cutting Jessica and Amelia out of our lives for good, an uneasy truce settled over Adam and me. We were two wounded soldiers, battered from the same war, but still struggling to find common ground. He spent most of his days holed up in his home office, no doubt trying to salvage what was left of his career and finances after having to legally batten down the hatches. I could only imagine the professional embarrassment of having to admit he'd fallen victim to such an insidious family con. As for me, I drifted in the limbo of our guest room, unsure of what my next move should be. Part of me still loved Adam, still wanted to fight for the life we'd had before this nightmare descended. But could I ever truly trust him again after how thoroughly he had dismissed and turned on me? We rarely spoke beyond courteous nods in passing. The shadow of betrayal hung too heavy between us. Then one evening, a heated argument from Adam's office caught my ear, voices raised in anger, his, but also an unmistakable snide female tone. I crept down the hallway toward the cracked door. You think you've won? It was Jessica, venom dripping from her words. You arrogant son of a bitch, you haven't seen the last of this. Get off my property before I call the police, you vindictive snake, Adam snarled. You've already cost me everything. Not everything, lover, she purred menacingly. Not yet. There was a pause, then the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Objects clattering, Adam grunting in anger and exertion. I couldn't stop myself. I burst through the door to see them grappling, Jessica clutching a heavy paperweight as they tussled. Adam! I cried in horror, rushing forward to try and separate them. Suddenly, a searing pain lanced through my head as something struck me from behind. White lights exploded in my vision, and I crumpled dazedly to the floor, my world spinning. Claire! Adam's voice seemed to come from a vast distance. Oh God, Claire! Blearily, I could make out shapes moving, voices distorting in and out as unconsciousness threatened to claim me. A furious Adam snatching the paperweight from the floor, Jessica's mocking laughter as she backed away. Who's the snake now, lover? Enjoy the sweet taste of my revenge. Then her voice faded, the only sound Adam's ragged breathing as he cradled me. I could feel warm stickiness spreading through my hair, each pulse of my heartbeat a spike of agony. Stay with me, baby, Adam pleaded, voice thick. Don't you dare leave me too. I wanted to respond, to reassure him, but the words stuck in my throat. Blackness crept in from the edges of my vision until everything faded to void. The next days, or was it weeks, passed in a drug-addled haze of pain and disjointed images. Hospital rooms, the acrid stench of antiseptic, murmurs of words like severe concussion and touch and go. When I finally reemerged into full consciousness, it was to find Adam slumped in a chair beside my bed, haggard and unshaven. He startled awake as I stirred, his eyes widening in relief. Oh, thank God, he rasped, voice cracking with emotion as he grasped my hand. I thought I might lose you too. I struggled to blink the cobwebs from my mind, memories slowly coalescing. Jessica, I murmured. She was there? Adam's jaw tightened with barely contained rage, her final parting shot before the authorities apprehended her. She and Amelia are both in custody now, facing a laundry list of charges. Despite my pounding head, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. At long last, they would face real consequences for their depravity. "I'm so sorry, Claire," Adam went on hoarsely. "If I had just been upfront from the start about Amelia, about my past, none of this would have happened. You never would have gotten hurt because of my lies." I could only gaze at him for a long moment, taking in the broken man before me. Once so self-assured and confident, now brought low by the very secrets he thought could be buried. "You're right," I finally said, squeezing his hand. "This all could have been avoided if you'd just been honest with me." Tears welled in Adam's eyes as he held my stare. "I've lost everything that ever mattered because of my mistakes. My job, my reputation. I'll be lucky if I can rebuild anything from the ashes." Gently, I stroked the stubbled plane of his cheek. "Not everything," I murmured. "Not yet." Adam's eyes widened slightly, a glimmer of hope flickering to life in their depths. A fragile, tentative spark in the darkness, but a spark nonetheless. As I gazed at the man I'd once loved, I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous. Rebuilding trust, piecing together whatever could be salvaged from the wreckage of lies and deceit. But if that spark could catch, if we truly had the strength to overcome the betrayals, perhaps there was still a chance to rekindle what we had lost. The choice would be ours to make. The crisp autumn wind carried the scent of pumpkin spice and freshly baked goods as I made my way down Main Street, clutching a stack of flyers for the annual Harvest Festival. The town square bustled with activity, and I couldn't help but smile at the familiar faces, setting up booths and decorating the park's gazebo with vibrant fall foliage. "Lila, over here!" My heart sank as I turned to find my sister, Marla, waving me over with a saccharine smile plastered across her perfectly made-up face. Even after a decade, the sight of her still stirred a whirlwind of emotions within me. Anger, resentment, and a lingering sadness that our bond had shattered beyond repair. "Marla," I managed, forcing a tight-lipped smile. "Fancy seeing you here." Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, zeroing in on the flyers in my hands. "Still running that quaint little bookstore of yours, I see." The condescending lilt in her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. "Yes, and it's doing quite well, thank you." Marla let out a derisive laugh, shaking her head. "You always were the hopeless romantic, clinging to those outdated dreams. When are you going to wake up and join the real world, Lila? A successful single woman like you shouldn't be wasting her time on such frivolous pursuits." My knuckles turned white as I gripped the flyers, fighting the urge to hurl them at her smug face. "At least I'm living an authentic life, Marla, instead of the facade you've so carefully constructed." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," I shot back, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You've always been jealous of me, ever since we were kids. That's why you did what you did. Stole Evan right from under me, just like you stole everything else that meant something to me." Marla's perfectly sculpted mask slipped, revealing a flash of the ugly, seething envy that lurked beneath. "Don't flatter yourself, Lila. Evan was never yours to begin with. He just realized what a pathetic, delusional loser you are and came to his senses." Her words cut deep, ripping open old wounds that had never truly healed. But this time, something within me shifted. A burning determination ignited in my chest, fueled by a decade's worth of pent-up anger and resentment. "Keep telling yourself that, Marla," I said, my voice low and steady. "But we both know the truth, and one day everyone else will too." With that, I turned on my heel and strode away, leaving her sputtering behind me. The time for cowering in her shadow was over. This was the start of something new, a reckoning years in the making, where the scales of justice would finally tip in my favor. No more playing the victim. It was time for Marla to face the consequences of her actions. As I stormed away from my encounter with Marla, memories came flooding back like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me in their bitter currents. It started when we were kids, really. Marla was always the favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I was the shy, bookish one, content to lose myself in the pages of a novel, Marla craved the spotlight, demanding attention with her antics and tantrums. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Mom would chide, her brow furrowed in disappointment whenever I fell short of Marla's lofty standards. Things only escalated as we grew older. In high school, Marla ruled the social scene, her posse of sycophants trailing in her wake. She snatched up the captain's position on the cheerleading squad, as well as the lead role in every school play. "Who would want to watch a play with you as the star, Lila?" she sneered when I dared to audition. "You're about as interesting as a piece of wet cardboard." And then came Evan, the one bright spot in my life, the kindred spirit who saw something in me that no one else did. We met during our freshman year of college and instantly clicked, our shared love of literature, and quiet nights spent reading together forming an unbreakable bond. At least I thought it was unbreakable. "Evan and I are getting married," Marla announced over dinner one night, her perfectly manicured nails gleaming as she flashed her gaudy engagement ring. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I stared at her, dumbfounded. Evan, my Evan, had proposed to Marla? The pieces started to fall into place. The hushed phone calls, the sudden cancellations of our dates, the distant look in his eyes. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice cracking with the weight of his betrayal. Marla simply shrugged, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. "He wanted a real woman, not some mousy little wallflower. Can you blame him?" Our parents remained eerily silent, their stunned expressions soon giving way to poorly concealed delight. Finally, their golden child was getting the happily ever after she deserved. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Marla's peals of laughter drifting down the hall, a hard knot of determination took root within me. She might have won this round, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. It was time to turn the tables on my so-called sister. The next morning I confronted Evan, demanding answers. But his words were little more than a slew of excuses and half-truths, each one more pathetic than the last. "I'm sorry, Lila, but your sister, she's just got this fire, this passion that I can't resist." His voice trailed off, his gaze averting from mine as if he couldn't bear to see the devastation etched across my face. In that moment, I knew there was no salvaging our relationship, no coming back from the depths of his deception. Marla had well and truly poisoned the well, her venomous influence seeping into every crevice of what we'd once shared. As I watched Evan slink away, shoulders hunched in defeat, a cold clarity washed over me. If Marla wanted to play dirty, then so be it. This was war, and I wouldn't rest until I emerged victorious, even if it meant razing her precious fairy tale to the ground. I slammed the door behind me, leaning back against the cool wood as I fought to catch my breath. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, the echoes of Evan's feeble excuses still ringing in my ears. A soft knock made me jump, and I whirled around to find Theo standing in the hallway, his brow furrowed in concern. "Lila? Are you all right?" I heard yelling. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat, a choked sob escaping instead. Tears I'd been holding back for far too long spilled down my cheeks, and I found myself enveloped in Theo's comforting embrace. He was an unlikely friend, the shy, socially awkward tech genius who lived down the hall. We'd bonded over our shared love of books and penchant for staying in on Friday nights, content in each other's company. "It's Marla," I managed finally, pulling away to swipe at my damp cheeks. "She's done something unforgivable." Theo's expression hardened, and he guided me into my apartment, settling us on the worn sofa. "Tell me everything." And so I did, the whole sordid tale spilling from my lips in a torrent of heartbreak and fury. Theo listened without interruption, his jaw tightening as I recounted Marla's latest betrayal. "That manipulative, lying snake," he muttered when I'd finished. "She's gotten away with this for far too long, Lila. It's time we put a stop to her games once and for all." I blinked, taken aback by the steely determination in his voice. Theo was always the voice of reason, the level-headed counterbalance to my occasional bouts of recklessness. "What do you mean?" I asked warily. He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a newfound intensity. "We're going to expose her for the fraud she really is. Strip away that perfect facade she's so carefully constructed and show everyone the truth that she's nothing but a selfish, conniving witch who'll stop at nothing to get what she wants." A slow smile spread across my face as the weight of his words sank in. Revenge, sweet, delicious revenge, was finally within my grasp. "How?" I breathed, my pulse quickening at the thought. Theo's smile turned feral, sending a shiver down my spine. "Leave that to me. I might not be much of a fighter, but I know my way around a computer system better than anyone. If there's dirt to be found on your sister, I'll find it. Over the next few weeks, Theo became my co-conspirator, my trusted ally in the battle against Marla's tyranny. He hacked into her emails, her bank records, her social media accounts, unearthing a trail of lies and deceptions that would make even the most hardened cynic blush. Financial misdeeds, extramarital affairs, backstabbing her so-called friends. No stone was left unturned as we meticulously compiled our arsenal of evidence. With each new revelation, the flames of my determination burned brighter, fueled by the knowledge that soon, very soon, Marla's reign of terror would come crashing down around her. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Theo asked one night as we pored over the mountain of incriminating files. "There's no going back once we pull the trigger." I met his gaze, unwavering. She brought this on herself. It's long past time Marla faced the consequences of her actions. A slow smile spread across his lips and he gave a solemn nod. "Then let's burn that bitch's world to the ground." The evidence was damning. A meticulously curated trail of infidelities, financial indiscretions, and outright lies that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. As Theo and I pored over the files, I could feel the righteousness of our cause burning within me, stoking the flames of a long-simmering fury. "Your sister really is a piece of work, isn't she?" Theo muttered, shaking his head in disbelief as he scrolled through yet another lurid email exchange between Marla and her latest boy toy. I shot him a withering glance. "You're telling me I've been dealing with her lies and manipulations my entire life." He let out a low whistle. "Well, she certainly made a mess of things this time. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" A slow, feral grin spread across my face as the pieces finally clicked into place. "We're going to give her exactly what she deserves, a taste of her own medicine." Theo arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "Do tell." Over the next few hours, we hashed out the details of our plan. A meticulously orchestrated takedown that would strip Marla of every last shred of her carefully cultivated dignity. No more hiding behind her pristine veneer, no more playing the doting wife and beloved daughter. It was time for the world to see her for the duplicitous snake she truly was. "We'll start by planting seeds of doubt," I explained, tapping my finger against the stack of incriminating documents. "Leak a few choice tidbits to the right people. Let the whispers and sideways glances begin to chip away at her perfect image." Theo nodded, his expression grim. "And then we go for the jugular. Release everything we've got in one fell swoop. Let the truth detonate like a nuclear bomb right in the middle of her precious little fairy tale." Exactly. My gaze hardened, steely with resolve. I want her to lose everything. Her sham of a marriage, her status, her reputation. I want her to feel the same burning humiliation she inflicted on me all those years ago. For a moment, Theo's eyes softened, and he reached across the table to take my hand in his calloused grip. "Are you sure about this, Lila? This is a point of no return. Once we set this plan in motion, there's no going back." I met his gaze, unflinching. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Marla has lied and cheated and stolen her way through life for far too long. It's time she learned that actions have consequences. His lips curved into a grim smile, and he gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Then let's make that bitch pay." Over the next few weeks, we put our plan into motion, gradually leaking choice morsels from our trove of evidence to select members of our social circle. At first, the reveals were subtle, a whispered rumor here, a meaningful glance there, but soon, the doubts began to take root. I could see it in the way Marla's closest friends started to regard her with narrowed eyes in the stony silences that greeted her at book club meetings and Sunday brunches. Little by little, the cracks in her meticulously constructed facade began to show, spiderwebbing outward until the whole sham threatened to crumble beneath the weight of its own deceit. And still, we kept the pressure on, releasing more damning evidence with every passing week. Sordid photos, incriminating audio recordings, bank statements detailing her financial treachery, nothing was off limits in our quest to decimate her credibility. Throughout it all, Marla remained blissfully oblivious, her perfectly coiffed head held high as she swanned through town, utterly convinced of her own untouchability. Her arrogance only fueled my determination. stoking the flames of a long simmering fury that would soon erupt into an inferno of retribution. Because the best was yet to come, the grand finale that would reduce her entire world to ashes. I could hardly wait. The whispers had begun, a steady undercurrent of doubt and suspicion that rippled through our once idyllic town, eroding the foundations of Marla's carefully constructed fairy tale. I could see it in the sidelong glances and thinly veiled sneers that followed her wherever she went, the once adoring masses now regarding her with a newfound wariness. It was working, I realized with a quiet thrill of satisfaction. Our drip feed of damning evidence was having the desired effect, ripping away the layers of artifice and exposing the rot that lay festering beneath Marla's immaculate veneer. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. We needed to go bigger, to plant the seeds of discord deeper, if we were to ensure the total annihilation of her pristine reputation. "Time for phase 2, Theo murmured, his expression grim as he handed me a thick manila envelope. I raised an eyebrow, thumbing through the contents, a dossier packed with incriminating photos, financial statements, and transcripts of Marla's most salacious indiscretions. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "Once we put this out there, there's no taking it back." Theo's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening with resolve. "She made her bed, Lila. Now she has to lie in it." With a steadying breath, I nodded. It was now or never. Over the next few weeks, I embarked on a whirlwind tour of reconnection, reaching out to our once tight circle of family and friends with the guise of reconciliation. Coffees and long lunches were had, old bonds rekindled under the pretense of burying the hatchet and moving forward. All the while, I subtly steered the conversations toward Marla, sharing carefully curated snippets from the dossier that painted a vivid picture of her betrayals and moral failings. "I can't believe she did that to you," Mom gasped, her eyes wide with horror as she pored over the damning evidence. "Oh, Lila, I'm so sorry. We never should have taken her side." Dad merely shook his head in stunned silence, his expression stricken as the full weight of Marla's deceptions finally sank in. One by one, the dominoes began to fall, each revelation stripping away another layer of blind loyalty, until the full, ugly truth was laid bare. By the time I was done, our once impenetrable inner circle had been thoroughly turned, their allegiances shifting in the wake of Marla's undeniable transgressions. Even Evan, her hapless husband, found himself wavering as the sordid details of her infidelities and financial treachery came to light. "I can't believe she'd do this to me," he muttered, running a hand through his hair as he stared at the incriminating photos. "After everything." His voice trailed off, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for the man who had once been my world. But the feeling was quickly quashed, smothered beneath the weight of his own betrayal all those years ago. He'd made his bed, too. Now he could damn well lie in it. With each encounter, each deftly planted revelation, I could feel the tides beginning to turn in my favor, the ground slowly but surely shifting beneath Marla's feet. Her downfall was imminent, and I savored the anticipation like a fine vintage wine, letting it linger on my tongue as I bided my time. Because soon, very soon, I would have my reckoning, and Marla would finally answer for the lifetime of hurt and humiliation she'd inflicted upon me. This time, there would be no manipulations or lies to sway the judgment, only the cold, hard truth laid bare for all to see. I could hardly wait. The air was thick with anticipation as our family and friends gathered at Mom and Dad's house for what I had billed as a long-overdue reunion. Marla, of course, was fashionably late, a perfectly calculated move to ensure all eyes were on her as she swept into the living room, her every step oozing false graciousness. "So wonderful to have everyone together again," she simpered, air-kissing her way around the room as if she were royalty bestowing favor upon her subjects. I watched in stony silence, feeling the weight of the manila envelope burning a hole in my purse. Tonight was the night, the culmination of months of meticulous planning and strategizing. By the time the evening was through, Marla's reign of deceit would be nothing more than a smoldering ruin. "Let's get started, shall we?" I said, rising to my feet and gesturing for Marla to join me at the front of the room. "I think it's high time we cleared the air about a few things." Marla's perfectly arched brows knit together in a slight frown, but she acquiesced with a saccharine smile, ever the gracious hostess. Little did she know, her world was about to come crashing down around her. For years, you've peddled this fiction, this carefully constructed fairy tale about who you are and what our relationship is, I began, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. You've lied and manipulated and backstabbed everyone around you, all in service of maintaining your precious image. Marla's smile faltered, the first cracks beginning to show in her impeccable mask. Lila, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Marla. It's over. I pulled the envelope from my purse, letting its damning contents spill across the coffee table in a cascade of incriminating evidence. The truth is finally out. A hushed gasp rippled through the room as our friends and family leaned in, their gazes riveted on the lurid photos and bank statements that laid bare the full extent of Marla's betrayals. Infidelities, financial crimes, blatant lies, it was all there, exposed for the world to see in glaring, undeniable detail. Marla's face, drained of color, her perfectly painted lips parting in a silent scream of outrage as the reality of her situation began to sink in. You did this. How could you? A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I regarded her with cold disdain. How could I? That's rich, coming from you. You've spent our entire lives undermining me, stealing everything that should have been mine. Well, no more. This is your reckoning, Marla. The consequences you've been dodging for far too long. That's a lie, she snarled, rounding on our shell-shocked parents with pleading eyes. You can't possibly believe this nonsense. It's all a bunch of doctored photos and falsified documents. I swear! But the certainty had already seeped from her voice, cracking beneath the weight of the incriminating evidence that surrounded her. One by one, Mom and Dad, our friends, even Evan himself began to nod in grim acceptance, their eyes reflecting a newfound hardness as the scales finally fell from their eyes. I think we've seen more than enough, Marla, Dad said quietly, his voice heavy with a weariness that spoke of decades of being manipulated and misled. It's over. A strangled sound escaped Marla's throat, a guttural cry of anguished disbelief as the full weight of her deceptions came crashing down upon her. In that moment she was utterly alone, cast adrift in a sea of contempt and censure, with no allies, no lifelines to cling to. As I watched her crumple to the floor in a heap of designer clothes and smeared makeup, a profound sense of vindication washed over me. At long last justice had been served, and I had been the one to deliver it. The sweet taste of victory had never been so intoxicating. The aftermath of my grand revelation was swift and brutal, a reckoning that left Marla's once charmed life in smoldering ruins. As the shock wore off and the true depths of her deceptions came to light, a palpable shift took place, the tide of public opinion turning decisively against her. Suddenly, the same people who had once fawned over her every move couldn't be bothered to make eye contact, their faces a study in thinly veiled disdain and revulsion. Marla's supposedly dear friends dropped her like a bad habit, their long-standing allegiances crumbling beneath the weight of her exposed betrayals. Even our own family wasn't spared the fallout. Mom and Dad, so long blinded by Marla's manipulations, now regarded her with a potent mix of disappointment and simmering anger. How could you do this to us? Mom demanded during one particularly heated exchange, her eyes rimmed with unshed tears. After everything we've done for you, all the chances we gave you. Marla, for once, was uncharacteristically subdued, her usual bravado nowhere to be found. I'm sorry, she mumbled, her gaze downcast and lifeless. I never meant to hurt anyone. The words rang hollow, a feeble attempt at contrition that did little to salve the wounds her deceit had inflicted. Dad merely shook his head, his expression hardening. Save it, Marla. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it. And what a bed it was, a tangled web of lies and indiscretions that quickly began to unravel with every passing day. Photos of her numerous affairs surfaced online, igniting a firestorm of scandal that left her reputation in tatters. Financial discrepancies were unearthed, hinting at potential legal troubles on the horizon. Even Evan, her hapless husband, couldn't turn a blind eye any longer, filing for divorce amidst a torrent of sordid revelations about her infidelity. Through it all, I watched with a strange sense of detachment, as if observing the implosion of someone else's life from a great distance. Gone was the seething rage that had once consumed me, replaced by a profound sense of catharsis, A weight lifted from my shoulders after years of carrying the burden of Marla's betrayals. She had brought this upon herself, I reminded myself whenever a flicker of residual guilt threatened to take hold. This was justice, pure and simple. The scales finally balanced after a lifetime of being tipped in her favor. Still, a part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity as I watched Marla's world crumble around her. She had become a pariah, shunned and reviled by the very people who had once hung on her every word. Her once vibrant spirit was utterly extinguished, replaced by a hollow shell of a woman who seemed to drift through life in a perpetual haze of shame and regret. It was during one such encounter, as I passed her on the street and caught a glimpse of her haunted expression, that a sudden clarity washed over me. This broken, pathetic creature was the true Marla, stripped bare of all her pretenses and deceptions, and in that moment I realized that I had already won. There was no need for further retribution or grandstanding. Her downfall was complete, her infamous reign of terror reduced to ashes and ruin. All that remained was for me to turn my back on the smoldering wreckage and begin charting a new course, one free from the shackles of her influence and the bitter chains of the past. As I walked away, head held high and shoulders squared, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of lightness, as if a great weight had finally been lifted from my soul. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years it belonged solely to me. Marla's fall from grace was absolute, and I, the forgotten sister she had wronged so deeply, had not only survived it, I had emerged victorious. In the weeks and months that followed Marla's spectacular downfall, an odd sort of calm settled over my life. The all-consuming fury that had once burned like a raging inferno within me had finally been extinguished, leaving in its wake a profound sense of peace and acceptance. Oh, there were still moments when the old resentments threatened to resurface. A passing glimpse of Marla's haunted, hollow-eyed stare, or an errant comment from a well-meaning friend that dredged up the lingering pain of her betrayals. But those moments were fleeting, mere hiccups in my newfound state of tranquility. Because at long last I was free from the shackles of Marla's manipulations and the bitter chains of the past that had bound me for far too long. With her reign of deceit laid bare and her carefully cultivated image reduced to ash, the power she'd held over me had simply evaporated like a puff of acrid smoke dispersed by the winds of change. It was an odd sort of victory, I mused as I wandered the sun-dappled aisles of my bookstore one crisp autumn morning. Not the blaze of glory I might have once envisioned, with Marla beaten and humbled at my feet. No, this was something quieter, more profound, a reclamation of self, a shedding of old skins, and the rebirth of my own sense of worth and identity. "Hey, you!" The soft tenor of Theo's voice drew me from my reverie, and I turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, a hesitant smile playing at the corners of his mouth. My heart gave a treacherous little flutter at the sight of him. My co-conspirator, my partner in vengeance, and perhaps something more? "Hey, yourself," I replied, arching an eyebrow in silent query. "Everything okay?" He drew in a steadying breath, seeming to steel himself for whatever words were about to come tumbling out. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing with, well, everything." My lips curved in a rueful smile. "You mean with taking down the wicked witch of the Midwest?" Theo's grin widened, the familiar teasing glint returning to his eyes. "Something like that, yeah." I shrugged, aiming for nonchalance, even as my pulse quickened beneath the weight of his steady gaze. "I'm good, Theo. Better than good, actually. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel free." His expression softened, those warm eyes of his drinking me in with an intensity that sent a shiver racing down my spine. "I'm glad to hear that, Lila. Really glad." We lapsed into silence then, the words hanging heavy and electric between us. In that moment, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something deeper in Theo's gaze. A promise, a beckoning toward new horizons and uncharted territory. But before I could gather the courage to give voice to the questions burning on the tip of my tongue, the spell was broken by the cheerful tinkling of the bell above the door, heralding the arrival of a customer. Theo blinked, his cheeks flushing slightly as he stepped back and cleared his throat. "Well, I should let you get back to it. Just, you know where to find me if you need anything, right?" I nodded, my own face growing warm as I scrambled to regain my composure. Of course, always. With one last lingering look, he turned and slipped out into the bustling street, leaving me to ponder the myriad of possibilities that seemed to stretch out before me. New vistas waiting to be explored, unfettered by the baggage of the past. As I watched Theo's retreating form disappear into the crowd, I couldn't help but feel a spark of hope flicker to life deep within my chest. A new chapter was unfolding, one penned by my own hand and ruled not by the whims of others, but by the simple truths that had guided me through my darkest hours: resilience, determination, justice. Marla's reign was over. It was my turn to take the stage, and this time I had every intention of basking in the spotlight. How could you do this to me? The words tumbled from my lips in a strangled whisper as my world crumbled around me. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, my engagement party to Elliot, the man I had loved for years. Our families and friends had gathered to celebrate our future together. But in a dimly lit hallway, just steps away from the joyous festivities, I overheard a heated exchange that shattered every dream we'd built. "You need to end this. I can't keep lying to Cadence," Elliot hissed in a hushed tone. My heart seized as a too familiar voice responded. "Come on, Elliot. You know how much I need you. She'll never have to find out." Wren, my own sister. The one person I should have been able to trust implicitly. Her words sliced through me like shards of betrayed disbelief. Unable to remain silent a moment longer, I pushed open the door and confronted the two people I loved most in this world, having the most clandestine of conversations. As their startled gazes fell upon me, the reality of their affair hung thick in the air. "Cadence, I can explain," Wren began, her eyes already welling with crocodile tears. But I silenced her with a raised hand, unable to bear her lies a moment longer. "Save your hollow apologies." I turned to face Elliot, the man I had planned to spend my life with. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling with scarcely restrained anguish. To his credit, he didn't prevaricate. 8 months. 8 months, while I had been meticulously planning our future, booking venues, trying on dresses. My dream wedding had become a sham even before it began. White-hot fury lanced through me, forcibly grounding me in that agonizing moment as I struggled not to crumple beneath the weight of such deceit. "The engagement is off," I declared in a tone that brooked no argument. "Both of you, get out of my sight." For once, Wren was mercifully silent as she swept past me, her eyes downcast. Elliot made as if to speak, but I shook my head sharply. "Don't," I warned him. Then they were gone, leaving me alone to process the sudden, brutal implosion of my life as I had known it. How could Wren, my closest confidant since childhood, have done this to me? And Elliot, he was supposed to cherish me above all others. The niggling sense of doubt and mistrust began worming its way through the cracks in my heart as I contemplated all the seemingly innocuous moments between them that may have hinted at this catastrophic betrayal. My mind rebelled against its own frantic analysis, leaving me emotionally unmoored in a sea of recrimination. Distantly, I became aware of the music and laughter from the next room, a mocking contrast to the tattered remnants of my life. I couldn't face my friends, my family, not like this. Squaring my shoulders, I spun on my heel and hastened in the opposite direction, away from the dream I had harbored and the brutal reality that was my new normal. As I slipped out a side door into the darkness of the night, the first fat drops of rain began to fall as if in mocking commiseration of my plight. My engagement, my heart, my very world, all of it shattered by those I loved and trusted most. But beneath the all-consuming ache of betrayal, an ember of rage flickered to life, vowing that one day, somehow, I would have my vengeance. I should have seen it coming, really. The signs were there all along, if I'm being honest with myself, which is something I haven't really allowed until now. Growing up, Wren was always the favored child, beautiful, vivacious, the embodiment of everything my mother Lorelei had dreamed of in a daughter. I, on the other hand, was the awkward bystander constantly laboring for their approval and affection. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" my mother would lament, oblivious to the cutting words. Or perhaps she understood their sting all too well. While Wren commanded the admiring gaze of every room she entered, I faded into the background unnoticed, a perpetual wallflower overshadowed by her dazzling radiance. Over time, envy and resentment took root within me, toxic seeds that would only fester as the years passed. Father was no help, maintaining a cordial but distant demeanor with both of us. I often wonder if he sensed the growing rivalry between Ren and I and simply chose to avoid adding fuel to that fire. His hands-off approach likely did more damage than he realized. The one solace I found was in my friendship with Marcus Bishop, who lived just down the street. Warm and kind-hearted, he treated me with a simple decency that was so achingly absent at home. While his affections likely extended beyond mere friendship, I was too consumed by my insecurities and need for familial acceptance to truly appreciate what was right in front of me. It was during high school that the dynamic between Ren and I took its most toxic turn. As her beauty and confidence bloomed, boyfriends and suitors flocked to bask in her radiant presence. But it never lasted, a fact I didn't fully comprehend until years later. She seduced my boyfriend right out from under me, Casey Harrington accused with righteous indignation after one of Ren's romantic conquests. I should have known she was just using me to get closer to him. At the time, I dismissed it as petty sour grapes from a jealous ex-friend. But the frequency of those accusations lodged in my subconscious like a persistent splinter I couldn't dislodge. It wasn't until college that I started noticing more suspicious signs of Ren's deceitful nature. Once, she befriended Amanda Lewis, only to steal her idea for a social media marketing app and present the concept to potential investors as her own. Amanda was too distraught and intimidated by our family's wealth to fight the intellectual property theft. When I finally worked up the nerve to confront Ren about her underhanded treatment of Amanda, she simply rolled her eyes. "Don't be so naive, Katie. I'm an opportunist, not a criminal. You'd do well to start looking out for number 1, too, instead of being so boringly ethical." Her callous disregard for Amanda's plundered dreams disturbed me, as did the realization that perhaps my parents' indulgent favoritism had warped Ren into developing such sociopathic tendencies. For the first time, I began distancing myself from the family, perpetually enamored with her charms. But still, the insidious self-doubt prevented me from recognizing the full extent of Ren's toxicity, until one fateful night shattered my naivety once and for all. That betrayal reconfirmed every past suspicion, every inkling that something was deeply rotten within my sister's core. But this time, the treachery cut too deeply to ignore any longer. As hurt and unmoored as I felt in the wake of Elliot and Ren's revealed affair, the fury coursing through me eclipsed it all. That deceptive snake had taken the one thing that meant everything to me, my chance at happiness. And for that she would pay dearly. No more willfully ignoring the signs, brushing off accusations, or deluding myself into familial dysfunction. Ren's days of exploiting my trusting nature were over. This time, I would be the one to claim the ultimate victory. The click of Ren's heels faded as she swept out of my apartment, leaving me alone to process the cataclysmic implosion of my life. I sank onto the couch, numb disbelief slowly giving way to a roiling amalgam of emotions: fury, anguish, determination. I had ended my engagement to Elliot and severed ties with Ren in one cataclysmic confrontation. But now the dust had settled. The magnitude of their betrayal began crystallizing into an inescapable truth. They had to pay. My thoughts were interrupted by a tentative rapping at the door. I tensed, half expecting it to be Elliot or Ren attempting further pathetic appeals. But the familiar voices drifting through made me exhale heavily. "Cadence? It's Mom and Dad. Can we come in?" Of course they would have heard the fallout by now. Steeling myself, I crossed the room and cracked open the door, revealing my parents' concerned visages. Mom immediately pulled me into an awkward embrace as Dad hovered nearby, his usual stoicism in place. "We just heard the most terrible rumors," Mom fretted as she released me. "About you, Elliot." She trailed off, unable to give voice to the reality. "It's true," I stated flatly. "I caught them together. The engagement is off." Mom's eyes widened in dismay, but Dad simply nodded as if he had been expecting such news all along. "I suspected as much," he murmured. "The writing has been on the wall with Ren for years." His tacit acknowledgement of her deceitful nature was both validating and enraging. If he recognized those tendencies, Why had he never addressed them? Why had I been left floundering and doubting my own instincts while she spun her web of lies and manipulations? Mom, meanwhile, looked utterly gobsmacked. Wren? And Elliot? She clutched Dad's arm for support. But she's your sister, and Elliot was going to be family. I laughed bitterly at her apparent naivete. Hadn't she been present for all the red flags, all the shady incidents that presaged this very betrayal? How could she still be so blind to the truth about her cherished youngest daughter? Mom, wake up, I said, none too gently. This has been a long time coming. Wren has been lying and using people for years. I was just too infatuated with her charms and your obvious favoritism to see it for what it was. The words lashed out harsher than intended, but I didn't regret their sting. My parents flinched as if I had struck them physically. Cadence, that's not fair. Dad rumbled in a low tone. You're letting your anger over this unpleasantness cloud your judgment. We've never favored one child over the other. I barked out a mirthless laugh. No? Then where was this paternal concern when I was constantly being berated and compared unfavorably to Wren growing up? Where was your support when she stole ideas and boyfriends from friends with impunity? Mom at least had the decency to appear abashed. Dad simply leveled his inscrutable gaze at me, utterly unmoved. You're overreacting, he pronounced at last. What's done is done. For the family's sake, you need to let this go and try to repair things with your sister. The audacity of his words struck me into momentary, dumbstruck silence. Let it go? After the devastation they had wrought? Unbelievable. Get out, I bit out, fighting to control the tremor of rage in my voice. Both of you, just get out of my sight. Cadence, please. Mom began, but Dad gripped her elbow firmly. You heard your daughter, he stated impassively. We'll go. But mark my words, this grudge will only lead you down a path of misery and bitterness. For your own sake, I hope you'll see reason before it consumes you entirely. With that parting admonition, he ushered Mom out and closed the door behind them with a dull thunk. I stared at the portal for several moments, letting the finality of Dad's words hang heavy in the air. But rather than cowing me into resignation, they fortified my resolve. If my own parents were too entrenched in denial to support me against Wren's machinations, then I would have to pursue justice alone. The rage that had been steadily building now took on a fevered intensity. Forget repairing bonds, this time I would shatter them asunder first. Once and for all, Wren would feel the scorching consequences of her selfish, duplicitous actions. Fueled by a righteous fury, I began meticulously plotting my next steps. Evidence had to be compiled, allies recruited to my cause. No stone could be left unturned in exposing the truth and dismantling the pedestal my family insisted on keeping Wren upon, no matter how much collateral damage occurred. She had declared war upon my future the moment she set her sights on Elliot. And in war, I fully intended to annihilate her. In the days following my parents' ill-fated intervention, a cold determination took root within me. If they weren't going to hold Wren accountable, then I would pursue justice myself, no matter how merciless it appeared. My first steps were basic but necessary reconnaissance. I began discreetly reaching out to Wren's former friends and romantic associates, carefully piecing together a timeline of her selfish manipulations and lies. The stories came pouring in like a ruptured dam once those burned bridges realized I was earnestly interested in exposing her misdeeds. Amanda Lewis, the entrepreneur whose marketing app idea had been stolen. Jessica Kim, whose boyfriend Wren had not so subtly seduced away. A parade of scorned exes and discarded confidantes lining up to deliver scathing testimonies. I documented every sordid account, every underhanded betrayal in a meticulous trail of evidence that would fuel the looming confrontation. But I knew more ammunition was still required to impact my family's entrenched adoration for Wren. Which is how I found myself at Marcus Bishop's doorstep one rain-swept evening, my old childhood friend and oft unrequited love startled to receive me. Cadence? What's going on? He asked, brow creasing with concern as he took in my taut expression. You look intense. Can I come in? I brushed past him without preamble. I need your help with something. Confusion flickered over his features, but Marcus acquiesced as he always did where I was involved. Inside his modest home, I wasted no time laying out the crux of the mission. I'm going to take Wren down, I declared bluntly. and I need an ally who has no qualms about getting their hands dirty. His jaw went slack as I detailed the evidence I'd gathered thus far of Wren's myriad wrongdoings over the years, up to and including her role in sabotaging my engagement to Elliot. By the time I finished, Marcus's expression had hardened into one of grim resolve. "You know you can count on me," he said, all traces of the jovial boy I'd known now supplanted by an intensity that matched my own. "After what your family put us through in high school, it'll be my pleasure to help dismantle the facade." I arched an eyebrow, recalling the hurtful memories he alluded to. While I had been too consumed by my impossible quest for Wren's approval, Marcus had borne the brunt of her disdain and cruelty simply for daring to be attracted to me. The fact that he still harbored a willingness to be in my corner spoke volumes. "Thank you," I said with simple sincerity. "With you on board, this is really happening." The first embers of what would become an unstoppable conflagration. Over the following days and weeks, Marcus and I built an impregnable dossier that left no treacherous stone of Wren's life upturned. Financial records illuminating her business indiscretions, a staggering body count of ruined friendships and romantic deceit, even a trail of online harassment targeting those who had initially scorned her. All of it was rigorously compiled as a case to be presented before the jury of our family's judgment. Throughout this process, I deflected every overture from Wren with icy silence, refusing to engage with her feeble pleas for reconciliation and forgiveness. I knew such hollow entreaties were simply preamble to further manipulation on her part. That pathology ran too deep to be undone by mere words. Only the devastating truth, once and for all laid bare before our relatives, had any hope of breaking her spell and toppling her unearned pedestal. Meanwhile, the dividing lines within the family grew increasingly defined. Mom persisted in her refusal to take sides, steadfastly avoiding the issue in a desperate bid to preserve the illusion of civility. Dad's pragmatic pragmatism aligned him more with me, though he refrained from outright condemning Wren's actions. And then there were the neutral observers reserving judgment until all was revealed at the looming reckoning I had meticulously planned, our annual family reunion, which promised to be more reality-shatteringly combustible than any beforehand. As the date grew nearer, I could feel the stakes, the intractable tensions ratcheting to an inexorable breaking point. Marcus and I had gathered the damning truth about Wren. Now came the moment of detonating that truth before a captive audience, once and for all, casting her into the scorching illumination she had diligently avoided for far too long. No more shadows to slither within, no more deceit or treachery to conceal. This would be the flames that forged the aftermath of a new reality, by whatever means were necessary. As the annual Monroe family reunion loomed, the chasm between myself and Wren calcified into an impassable rift. Every attempt at reconciliation on her part was met with stony silence and refusal to engage. My single-minded focus remained on fortifying the case against her, to protect myself from any hint of relenting in the face of her master manipulation tactics. Marcus, meanwhile, proved to be an invaluable ally in ensuring my resolve never wavered. "You're doing the right thing, Cadence," he stated with a firm nod one evening as we reviewed the mounting evidence file. "Wren's deception has to be exposed, no matter how much it disrupts the family." I felt something inside me settle at his pragmatic words, shoring up my convictions. "Do you really think if we lay out all the facts before everyone, they'll finally see her for what she is?" A pensive look passed over Marcus's features. "I'd like to hope so. But you have to be prepared for the probability that some will remain willfully blind to the truth." My jaw clenched at the thought. After all the undeniable proof we had compiled, testimony after testimony from Wren's litany of victims, how could anyone not be swayed from their entrenched positions? Unless, "You think Mom and Dad knew, don't you?" I accused, the horrible notion coalescing into grim reality. "About the level of Wren's depravity, that's why they urged me to just forgive and move past her affair with Elliot." Marcus exhaled heavily. "I don't know for sure, but the signs were there, and we both know your parents favor her to an unhealthy degree. I wouldn't put it past them to ignore or excuse her indiscretions to maintain appearances." White-hot fury lanced through me at the thought of such outrageous dereliction on their part. But then, Dad had basically admitted as much in our last confrontation, callously demanding I repair things with Ren for the family's sake. If that's the case, they're just as culpable as she is, and they'll be held accountable too. The hard glint that entered Marcus's eyes confirmed his alignment with me on this path of reckoning. No one would be exempt from having their role in enabling Ren's depredations laid bare. In the meantime, other members of the extended family began fragmenting into factions, those siding with Ren's professed innocence, and those reserving judgment until they saw the proof for themselves. Rumor and gossip percolated unchecked through the grapevine as the reunion date drew nearer. It came as little surprise when Aunt Margot, Ren's most ardent supporter, cornered me while I was inspecting the reunion venue. "This ridiculous vendetta has gone on long enough," she snapped without preamble, eyes flashing with indignation. I regarded her coolly, long inured to her relentless preferential treatment of Ren. "I have evidence, Aunt Margot. Too much to ignore, even for you." She made a disdainful noise, adjusting her gaudy fur stole. "Evidence? Of what? That poor, innocent Ren may have made some minor indiscretions in her youth? She's a grown woman now, and any issues between you two should have been laid to rest ages ago." Revulsion twisted my gut at her blasé dismissal. Evidence be damned, Ren's legions of apologists would never be dissuaded by facts. I opened my mouth to retort, but Margot barreled onward. "Mark my words. If you insist on airing out this meaningless grudge at the reunion, it's your standing with the family that will suffer most dearly. Think on that before throwing more absurd allegations at your sister." With that parting threat hanging in the air, she spun on one alligator-skinned heel and flounced away before I could respond. I was left fuming in the midst of the very venue where the battle lines would soon be brutally and uncompromisingly drawn. Margot's sneering disregard strengthened my resolve more than any pleas for capitulation could have eroded it. If Ren's supporters were that entrenched in denial and blind devotion, then nothing short of bloody warfare would suffice to shatter their foolish idolatry. When next the extended clan assembled, the reckoning would be inescapable. I now understood that upheaval was inevitable in order to excise the cancer of Ren's sociopathic influence once and for all. So be it then. Whatever the permanent fractures and severed bonds, the scales would finally be balanced, no matter how much upheaval was required. There could be no half measures, no compromise when absolute justice was the only acceptable outcome. As I strode out of the venue with purposed strides, I felt the sudden exhilarating clarity of a woman locking onto her crusade's trajectory and seeing it through regardless of consequence or collateral damage. For too long, Ren had sown ruination without repercussion. Now, at long last, she would reap the whirlwind of merciless retribution. The annual Monroe family reunion was always an ostentatious affair, owing to my parents' predilection for shameless displays of wealth and status. This year's no-expense-spared Venetian masquerade ball theme only amplified the pretentious grandeur. But beneath the glamorous marble floors and glittering chandeliers, an electric current of tension thrummed through the assembled masses, rife with unspoken expectation. Perhaps it emanated from my own coiled determination as I watched the revelers circulate with studied nonchalance. I caught a familiar flash of auburn in the crowd and felt my gut tighten reflexively. Ren, resplendent in a cream-colored gown with an intricately beaded mask, accepted adoring compliments from a knot of family members with her trademark, beguiling smile. It was sickening to behold her deceptions being so blindly celebrated. But that was all about to change. A steadying hand came to rest on my elbow, and I glanced over to meet Marcus's resolute gaze through his own black silk mask. A silent affirmation that he had my back, no matter the chaos that was about to unfurl. I gave a tight nod, then turned and weaved through the gathered throngs until I reached the raised platform at the head of the ballroom. Retrieving a weighty manila envelope from my clutch, I rapped my knuckles decisively against the microphone to summon the room's attention. The festive din evaporated, all eyes swiveling to fasten upon me in bewildered curiosity. Even Ren's impeccably masked expression dimmed with trepidation. Good. Let the first seed of doubt take root. "Good evening, everyone," I began in a tone that brokered no warmth. "And thank you for being here to commemorate another year of the Monroe family legacy." I let the seemingly innocuous statement linger for a beat before delivering the detonation. A legacy, I'm afraid, that has been irrevocably tarnished by one individual's chronic deceit and depravity. For too long, that person has been permitted to indulge her poisonous impulses, while the rest of us have averted our eyes or made excuses. A susurrus of bewildered muttering rippled through the crowd. In my periphery, I could see Mom and Dad shooting me alarmed looks, while Aunt Margot's face turned an obstructed plum hue. Only Marcus remained impassive, silently urging me onward from beside the stage. "No more," I declared into the microphone, relishing the undercurrent of sharpening tension. "Tonight, the truth will be laid bare for us all to confront, because if we don't purge this toxic influence from our family, it will only fester and rot us from within." With a sharp gesture, I ripped open the manila envelope and upended its contents in a cascading deluge of documentation across the stage. Photographs, financial statements, reams of written testimony detailing every sordid misdeed spilled out in a damning, tangled heap at my feet. The impact was palpable, a collective inhalation of breath from the assembled as they beheld the staggering body of evidence. The muttering swelled in disbelieving volatility. "You see this?" I stabbed a manicured fingertip towards the incriminating morass. Proof of deception, betrayal, even criminal actions, all at the hands of one person, brazenly indulging their appetite for ruining the lives of others. My gaze bored into Wren's now as her mask of composure began slipping, the first glimmer of icy panic seeping through. Flicking my wrist, I produced a sheaf of papers with a thick report binding, holding it aloft for all to see. This comprehensive case study documents years of misdeeds, going all the way back to high school with the calculated sabotage of friendships and romantic relationships. With contemptuous fury, I lobbed the report like a thrown gauntlet to bounce and skid across the floor directly before Wren. Every wronged friend or former lover whose life you played with like personal Jenga tiles. Every kind-hearted dupe like Amanda Lewis, whose innovative business concept you stole out from under her without a shred of remorse. It's all delineated here in both their words and undeniable documentation. I paused to sweep my hardened stare over the veritable sea of slack-jawed expressions, willfully oblivious allegiances now being ripped asunder by the inexorable truth. "You didn't think anyone was watching, did you, Wren?" I sneered into the ringing silence. "That your carefully crafted mask of charm and feminine wiles would let you slither through life unscathed, no matter who you bulldozed in your path." Compulsively, I started pacing in a predatory arc around the horrified statue of my sister, driving the point home with merciless precision. "Well, your pathology ends here. Since Dad urged me to put this messy affair behind me for the family's sake, I've decided to heed his advice by purging the cancer that is your toxic existence from our family once and for all." The blow finally landed, a visible flinch from Dad's stricken expression as regret and self-recrimination clouded his features. But there would be no more enabling, no matter how deep the denial ran. As if surfacing from a daze, Wren jolted back to defensive posturing, chin uplifted in a transparent attempt to retain her shaken mask of superiority. "You're deranged if you think anyone will give credence to this ridiculo. You had an affair with my fiancé, Elliot." I didn't let her venom-laced dismissal gain traction, swiftly landing the most visceral gut punch in full view of everyone. A strangled gasp from Mom pierced the heavy silence before I pressed on relentlessly. "For 8 months, you were oiling the depths of your deceptions by sleeping with my fiancé while lying to my face every single day. So don't even try playing the wounded innocent in the face of overwhelming evidence. Your reign of treachery is over, dear sister." Wren's mouth moved in a stunned rictus, but I had already turned away to face the ballroom once more, garnet eyes blazing with righteous justification. Now it falls upon this family to determine the next steps, whether we countenance and enable such poisonous impulses in our midst any longer, or if we avail ourselves of this truth, confront it head-on, and rebuild from the ashes stronger than before. But mark my words. I skewered Wren with a contemptuous glare, every fiber brimming with conviction. I will never stop until you face the consequences of your abhorrent actions. No matter what it costs me, this ends tonight. There it was, the gauntlet thrown, the die irrevocably cast. As murmurs of shock and recrimination swelled to fevered pitch, I stepped back to allow the maelstrom to gain unstoppable momentum. The reckoning had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The ballroom erupted into pandemonium the moment the final damning words left my lips. A cacophony of shouts, gasps, and furious denials ricocheted through the assembled masses as the staggering truth sliced through years of willful delusion. Wren, for all her guile and predatory instincts, seemed to have been robbed of the power of speech. She stood there amidst the chaos, rooted to the spot and ashen-faced, as the carefully cultivated facade began cracking beyond repair. Lies! Aunt Margot's strident screech pierced through the din as the woman I had once pitied for her obsequious devotion to Wren flew into a virulent rage. This is nothing but deranged, spiteful lies born of jealousy. She pitched forward, clawing hands outstretched, as if to snatch up and rend apart the damning evidence strewn at my feet. Before she could take more than 2 steps, Marcus materialized from the shadows and caught Margot's flailing wrists in a restraining grip. "Don't do anything rash you'll regret," he warned her in a low tone thick with menace. Margot's eyes bulged in outrage and disbelief until she recognized her would-be assailant. Then her expression congealed into one of utter loathing as realization set in. "The poor boy finally became Cadence's lapdog, I see," she spat with vile insinuation. "Did she promise to let you sample a taste if you helped her with this insane crusade?" A muscle ticked in Marcus's jaw, but he released Margot with a look of pure disgust before rejoining my side, steadfast and resolute. I felt fortified by his presence, squaring my shoulders to face the mounting pandemonium. "Listen to yourselves," I shouted over the escalating tumult. This desperate need to attack the messenger, rather than confront the grievous truth staring you all in the face. Wren is a master manipulator who will say anything, do anything to preserve the facade you've all embraced like gullible fools. That succeeded in redirecting the outrage towards its proper target. Wren, visibly startled as a acidic murmur of condemnation rippled outwards, causing bystanders to recoil from her as if burned. "It can't be true," Mom whispered brokenly, tears spilling down her ravaged face as she clutched Dad's arm in desperation. "My baby girl could never." I actually felt a fleeting pang of empathy as I beheld Mom's world shattering under the relentless weight of proof. But it was far too late for sympathy to sway me. Whatever trauma she and Dad were enduring now, they had brought upon themselves with their indulgence of Wren's toxicity over the years. "Wake up and smell the truth, Mother," I stated with a tinge of weary impatience. "Your proud daughter is a sociopath who has wreaked havoc on everyone around her for her own selfish gratification." A strangled sound escaped Wren then, causing all eyes to rivet upon her. For the first time, the malicious glint I had always subconsciously recoiled from blazed hot and unrestrained in her gaze. All artifice, all attempts at dissembling had been abandoned. "You ungrateful," she hissed with naked hatred. "After all I sacrificed to make something of myself, to pull myself up and out of Mom and Dad's miserable shadow? You're just jealous that I surpassed you by sheer willpower." "Sacrificed?" I echoed with bitter mockery. "Tell that to the legions of loved ones you sacrificed in your warpath of using and discarding lives for your own vainglorious desires." That struck a nerve, a visible wince passing over Wren's features as if rebuked. But the moment's self-awareness was fleeting, as she quickly regained her malignant contempt. "You want to tear down my world out of petty grievances?" Her voice rang out in silken menace. "I played by the rules society dictated and reaped the rewards. Don't come crying to me just because you lacked the fortitude to do the same, dear sister." A roll of revulsion twisted through me at her blatant rationalization, her utter refusal to accept wrongdoing even when confronted so baldly. This was why the extreme measures had been necessary. Wren's sociopathic conviction was too deeply entrenched for redemption. Before I could formulate a retort, a commanding baritone cut through the tension like a scythe. "Enough of this." All eyes swiveled as Dad stepped forward, his expression chillingly impassive, save for a glacial glint of finality. "You've shown your true colors for all to see, Wren. Outlined a life's litany of treachery and callous betrayals against friends, associates, even your own family." The devastated look he flashed towards Mom broke through the stony facade for just an instant as visible anguish. Tonight, we face some harsh truths about the person you've become. But my decision regarding retribution is clear." He drew a steadying breath, seeming to draw an air of grim majesty about himself as if preparing to pronounce judgment upon the transgressions before him. "From this moment, you are exiled from this family, severed from the Monroe legacy, our bloodline, everything. For your misdeeds and refusal to accept responsibility or remorse, you are disowned in perpetuity." A dismayed cry from Wren rent the expectant hush as the words reverberated with incontrovertible finality. I could only stare, momentarily awash in shock that Dad had delivered such a devastating pronouncement. Not just cut off financially, societally shunned and scorned, but disowned in the most elemental sense. Rendered a non-entity in terms of lineage and ties to our clan forevermore. It was a punishment as extreme as the litany of sins we had brought to light. One Wren seemed to belatedly understand the gravity of. "No." The anguished moan emerged piteous and small, a far cry from the imperious sociopath who had attempted to gaslight us with rationalizations mere moments ago. "Father? Father, please, I'm still your daughter?" But Dad's features were already hardening once more, all hint of inner turmoil calcifying to iron resolution. No daughter of mine could inflict such profound betrayals with no compunction. The very DNA you inherited from the Monroe bloodline has been rendered null and void this night. He turned away then, wrapping a protective arm around Mom's shuddering shoulders, as outrage and accusations began swirling anew amidst the assemblage. From the corner of my eye, I could see Aunt Margot gesturing furiously at anyone who would listen, no doubt attempting to undermine and subvert Dad's decree. But even she had been utterly steamrolled beneath the possession of bitter truth and culpability finally laid bare. My gaze was inexorably drawn back to Wren, crumpled on the floor now, like some pathetic, discarded marionette shorn of its strings. Her expression was one of naked anguish, a haunted realization that the ignominy of excommunication from everything she cherished had irrevocably taken root. She met my stare head-on, desperation writ large in her eyes, not for forgiveness or absolution, but to silently beg me to deliver a stay of execution against the sentence handed down. I simply regarded her impassively, and offering no solace or mitigation against the inferno of reckoning she had brought crashing down upon herself. There was only a vacant, hollow pity for the shattered megalith, realizing too late that true consequence had finally arrived to dismantle her pedestal of depravity. This was the moment I had sacrificed and bled to achieve, the undeniable silencing of Wren's pernicious influence at long last. Not through placation or insincere pleas for change, but the laying of a scorched earth in the searing aftermath of her flames. In the days and weeks following Wren's cataclysmic downfall at the family reunion, an uneasy detente settled over the Monroe clan. The shockwaves from my shattering revelations and Dad's subsequent disownment decree had rent us asunder, but not irrevocably so. At least, not for those willing to stare unflinchingly into the truths that had been dragged into the harsh light of reality. A sort of grim solidarity emerged from the ranks who had borne witness to Wren's unmasking that fateful night. Those who recognized the justness in finally severing her toxic influences from our midst, no matter how excruciating the personal costs. And there were indeed heavy personal costs to absorb for many. Mom, God bless her, had retreated into a shell of haggard disbelief in those first few weeks. Between losing a daughter she loved despite her misdeeds and culpability for enabling those misdeeds, I couldn't fathom the depths of her turmoil. Dad, conversely, seemed almost galvanized by the brutal reckoning he had helped mete out, as if cauterizing the malignant limb had been a purgative act, allowing him to stride forth renewed from the ashes of dysfunction. Our family's integrity has been preserved, he told me stoically during a rare moment of bonding between us. Painful as the means were, the path ahead is now unobstructed from corrosive influences. I remember searching his craggy features' uncertainty in those instants, looking for any hint of lingering inner conflict or doubt over the irrevocable verdict he had handed down upon his own progeny. But there was only the same patented composure and resolution that had always defined James Monroe. How he could rationalize his decision with such stark pragmatism, I may never fully comprehend. But then, Our entire dynamic had been forever reshaped now in the searing conflagration that was Wren's self-immolation. The shockwaves extended outward, too, with various relatives fracturing off into splintered factions almost overnight. Some, like Aunt Margot, vehemently castigating Dad's ruling while rushing to stand in solidarity with the exiled Wren. Others distancing themselves from the inferno of inner turmoil entirely. And still others, well, Marcus and I gained some unlikely new voices championing our tenacious pursuit of justice, no matter how devastating the costs. It was yet another example of boundaries being redrawn, of the tectonic family plates shifting forever in the aftershocks. But I felt a sense of lightness, too, the first freedom from Wren's overhanging shadow I could remember feeling. That poisonous umbra had been eradicated at long last, allowing the first rays of redemption to break through. Marcus was with me every step as I trod those first tentative steps into reclaiming my life's trajectory. From ensuring Elliot faced the full legal and professional ramifications for his betrayal to determinedly rebuilding the tarnished dynamics with Mom and Dad. "You were the catalyst for renewal, Cadence," Marcus reminded me with a steadying hand on my arm whenever my regrets or doubts threatened to eclipse the path ahead. "Don't let the momentary growing pains overshadow the healthier family you've fought to reclaim." Those words anchored me more times than I could count through the arduous slog of confronting wounds, lancing toxicity, and enduring the fallout of realigned bonds, until, finally, the dust began settling on the smoldering aftermath. There was so much wreckage to confront in that ashen landscape, both within the family and surrounding it from Wren and Elliot's devastation trail. But I surveyed the damaged sites now as a master craftsman might, already plotting out the blueprint for reconstruction from the strongest of building blocks. That was the paradoxical gift of Wren's excision from my life, you see. In dismantling her poisonous tentacles, I had cleared the detritus of dysfunction to reveal the bedrock truth that I was the architect of my own identity. No more falling into lockstep behind a sociopathic sibling's delirious wake just to chase hollow approval, or reflexively adhering to toxic family patterns from childhood. I was free to build upon my own terms, the raw materials being the redemptive bonds with those walking beside me. My eyes would inevitably be drawn to Marcus during those pivotal, transcendent moments, the steadfast best friend who had championed me even when I could not see my own worth, who now stood by my side with a renewed glint in his eyes, silently willing me into this next rebirthed phase of life. There was warmth, affection, and perhaps even a tantalizing frisson of new possibilities shimmering between us each time our gazes met and held in those cathartic moments. A sense that the razing of my former existence had not been for naught, but had instead cleared the path for something brilliant and imminently worth fighting for. When at last I felt the final vestiges of Wren's shadow lifted forever from my soul, it was Marcus's steady hand entwined in mine, twin pillars striding forth into the light together as new lives took radiant shape. "You're dead to me, Tara. This is my house now." Candace's icy words cut through me as she towered over my crumpled form, blood trickling from the gash on my head where she had smashed the crystal vase. It had all started so innocently when Derek and I got married 5 years ago. We were hopelessly in love, and I couldn't have been happier starting our life together. But Candace made it her twisted mission to drive a wedge between us from day one. "She's just jealous because you're so young and beautiful," Derek would say, brushing off his older sister's constant put-downs and snide remarks. I should have taken it as a warning sign of the hell to come. At first, it was little digs about my cooking or how I kept the house. Then it escalated to her dropping not-so-subtle hints that I didn't deserve Derek or his money. The more I tried to make peace, the nastier she became. "You're just a gold digger looking for a free ride," she spat during one of her rages when Derek wasn't around. "My brother is too good for you." Derek refused to see Candace's true colors no matter how much evidence I showed him of her manipulation. She was his precious big sister who could do no wrong in his eyes. I don't know if it was guilt over being the favorite child or just pure brainwashing, but he always took her side. Things came to a head when I discovered bank statements showing Candace had been slowly siphoning money from their inheritance after their parents died. I finally had proof of her conniving ways, but Derek just blew up at me for prying into family matters. "How dare you accuse my sister of something like that?" he shouted, his face turning beet red. "You're the one with the problem, always looking for reasons to hate her." That's when Candace struck, seizing her chance to play the innocent victim while I was the scorned villain. The vase came out of nowhere, caving the side of my skull before I could react. As I crumpled to the floor, her shadow loomed over me with those chilling parting words. I lay there in a daze, struggling to stay conscious while Candace ranted and raved about how she would finally get what she deserved. My life with Derek. The love of my life just stood there like a coward, unable to lift a finger against his twisted sister. That's when I knew my marriage was beyond saving. But I'll be damned if I'd let that psychopath take everything I had while getting away with it. I should have seen the signs earlier, but I was too blinded by love and Candace's mastery of manipulation. Derek's older sister had been scheming to turn him against me from the moment we got married. "Oh, Tara, this pot roast is a bit dry, don't you think?" Candace would say with a saccharine smile during one of her weekly dinner visits. "You really need to keep an eye on things in the kitchen." Derek would just chuckle and wave it off. "Candace is just teasing. It's fine, honey." But it was a pattern. She'd mock my homemaking skills, my appearance, how I spent money, anything to undermine me and make me seem inadequate as Derek's wife, and he ate it up, his sister's poisonous words slowly turning his adoring gaze into one of doubt and disdain. "Don't you think that dress is a bit revealing?" he started saying when we went out. "My sister's right. You could stand to be a little more modest." The emotional abuse only escalated as the years rolled by. Candace would sweep in like a tornado, leaving chaos and misery in her wake with every visit. Derek increasingly took her side, berating me for being oversensitive whenever I called out her cruelty. "She's my sister, Tara. Blood," he'd rage, his 6'3" frame towering over me. "You need to learn to accept her." Meanwhile, Candace played the victim, batting her eyes innocently whenever I confronted her. "I'm just trying to help, that's all. You're always so defensive for no reason." I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in with no escape. My adoring husband had become Candace's enabler, allowing her to treat me like dirt in my own home. I knew I had to find proof of her true sinister nature before it was too late. That proof came when I discovered bank statements showing Candace had been slowly siphoning money from the inheritance she shared with Derek after their parents died. I couldn't believe my eyes. This went far beyond her usual mind games. She was outright stealing from her own brother. "Look at this." I desperately showed the statements to Derek. "Your precious sister has been robbing you blind." His face turned beet red with rage, but not at the betrayal I'd uncovered. "How dare you go snooping through my private financial records? What gives you the right?" "Are you serious?" I cried out, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. "She's been taking your money for years and you're attacking me?" That's when Candace played her most brilliant card, rushing into the room with crocodile tears glistening in her eyes. "Derek, I had no choice," she blubbered, pulling him into an embrace. "The medical bills from Mom's cancer treatments, the nursing home fees for Dad, I've been drowning in debt from taking care of them. I didn't want to worry you." Hook, line and sinker. Just like that, the vile leech had turned the tables, positioning herself as the martyr making sacrifices for family. Derek pulled away from my grasp, disgust etched on his face. "See what you've done, Tara? How could you put my sister through this after everything she's done for us?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. Candace just smirked at me, having won yet another twisted victory. In that moment, I realized I was truly alone in this nightmare, and that gave me a reckless determination to bring my tormentor down, no matter what it took. The tension in the house was thicker than fog after Candace's latest manipulative stunt. Derek could barely look me in the eye, still seething over my betrayal of digging into his finances and calling out his precious sister's lies. "How could you do this to me, Tara?" he seethed over the dinner table, pushing his plate away. "Accusing Candace of stealing from her own family? She's sacrificed everything for us." I opened my mouth to protest, but he raised his hand to silence me. "Don't. I don't want to hear another word against her. My sister is the only one I can really trust." The message was clear. I was the enemy now for daring to disrupt Candace's crocodile tear narrative about being buried in debt from taking care of their parents. Derek had fully drunk her Kool-Aid. I should have known then that there was no saving my marriage, but some deluded part of me still clung to hope. I decided to make one last effort to get through to Derek and expose his sister's depravity. A few nights later, Candace swept in for another of her family dinner visits, primped and preening in a gaudy low-cut top that seemed designed to taunt me. Derek and I could barely get 2 words out before she was running her mouth as usual. Well, if it isn't the little wife trying so hard to keep up appearances, she sneered as I set the table. That shirt looks a bit tight, doesn't it, dear? Trying to catch someone's eye besides my brother's? I felt my face burn with humiliation, but I refused to take her bait this time. Hello, Candace. Lovely to see you too. She arched an overplucked eyebrow at my calm tone. What, no snide remarks today? Don't tell me you finally learned some class. That's enough, Candace. Derek barked, finally growing a spine. Leave her alone? I felt a rush of gratitude. He was finally defending me. But Candace just tutted and shook her head slowly. Derek, you're too blind to see what a disrespectful, ungrateful shrew she is. Always mouthing off. No wonder you can't control her. If I were you, I would have put that little tramp in her place a long time ago. That's when hell broke loose. You self-righteous bitch! I exploded, sending a glass of wine crashing to the floor. I should have known you'd never let up with your vicious, toxic behavior. Candace recoiled in mock horror. Why, I never, Derek! Derek, did you hear what she just called me? Derek's face was thunderous. You watch your mouth, Tara. That's my sister you're talking to. I rounded on him, years of anger and resentment boiling over. Are you kidding me right now? She's the one who came in here slinging insults from the second she walked through that door. Why are you making excuses for her? Because she's my family, he roared, spit flying from his mouth. Blood is thicker than water, in case you've forgotten. Oh yes, let's talk about family, I shot back, seeing red. Like how she's been stealing money from your inheritance for years? Or did you just conveniently forget about those bank statements I showed you? Candace gasped, putting a delicate hand to her chest. Derek, you didn't tell me she was still going on about that ridiculous accusation. How dare you keep dredging up lies about me? Derek looked like he'd been slapped, the vein in his neck bulging. He stepped towards me, fists clenched, and for a terrifying moment I thought he was going to strike me. Get out, he said in a low, trembling voice. Get out of my house right now before I do something I'll regret. I stared at him in disbelief as Candace smirked behind his back. This was really it. My marriage was over and she had won. But I didn't leave. Not yet. You want me out so bad, I shouted, feeling reckless. Fine, I'm gone, but not before everyone knows what a psychopathic, money-grubbing snake your sister really is. I stormed out of the house that night, tears of rage and despair stinging my eyes. Derek had made his choice loud and clear. His poisonous sister would always come before me, no matter how much hell she put me through. Where could I even go? I had given up my career, my friends, my entire life to be Derek's wife. Now I was out on the street with nothing, all because I dared to defy his deranged beloved Candace. There was only one person I could turn to, my best friend Jill. I broke down sobbing when she opened her door, unleashing the torrent of emotions I had been bottling up for years. That evil bitch has ruined everything, I wailed as Jill ushered me inside. Derek is so brainwashed, he'll never see her for the manipulative monster she truly is. Jill wrapped me in a tight hug, letting me cry it all out. When I finally regained my composure, she looked me square in the eye with grim determination. Enough is enough, Tara. You can't let Candace just walk all over you like this. It's time to fight back. I shook my head despondently. Against her? You don't know the half of what I've been through. She's got Derek so wrapped around her finger, he'll never believe a word I say about her true nature. Then we need evidence, Jill stated firmly. Proof that she's the conniving psychopath you say she is. Once we have that, we can bring her down for good. An ember of hope flickered in my chest. The bank statements showing her stealing from their inheritance. Those were just the tip of the iceberg. There has to be more we can find to expose her. Jill nodded grimly. We start digging first thing tomorrow morning. I'm not letting my best friend's life be destroyed by this witch. Over the next few days, Jill and I formed a plan to infiltrate Derek's home and gather any information that could take Candace down for good. With her working as a realtor, it was easy for Jill to make a copy of the house keys and scope out when Derek was at work. "Keep your eyes peeled for anything suspicious," she instructed as we slipped into the house. "Emails, letters, documents, it all could be the key to exposing her." I rifled through Derek's office with trembling hands, my heart pounding. If Candace found out what we were doing, I shuddered to think of the consequences. But then a hidden file caught my eye. Bank statements and legal documents from several years ago. As I flipped through the pages, I felt the blood drain from my face. "Jill, you need to see this," I said in a shaky voice. The documents confirmed my worst fears. Candace had been under investigation for allegedly attempting to murder her own husband several years earlier. There were transcripts of witnesses claiming she had been siphoning money from his accounts and trying to pressure him into changing his will. Then he had died suddenly in a suspicious car accident, with the police unable to prove foul play. Candace had inherited everything, and the case had gone cold. "Oh my God," Jill whispered, hand over her mouth. "Are you telling me this psycho actually killed her husband for his money?" I nodded slowly, feeling numb. "And she's been doing the exact same thing to Derek this whole time. That's why she was so hell-bent on turning him against me. I was the one obstacle keeping her from my husband's inheritance." Jill's eyes hardened to steel. "We have everything we need now. It's time to make that evil bitch pay for what she's done, once and for all." I felt a dark sense of resolve overtake me, pushing away the fear and doubt. Candace's reign of terror was finally going to come crashing down around her. And this time, there would be no more playing the victim. The evidence of Candace's murderous past stunned me into silence. This went far beyond her usual mind games and manipulation. She was an outright psychopath who had likely killed for money before. "We need to take this to the police right away," Jill stated, her face pale. "Who knows what that nutjob is capable of if she's gotten away with murder once already?" I nodded numbly, still reeling from the bombshell revelation. Part of me had always suspected Candace was unhinged, but proof that she was an actual killer took things to a whole new level of depravity. "You don't understand," I said hollowly. "Derek will never believe any of this, no matter what we show him. He's too deep under her spell." Jill set her jaw grimly. "Then we make sure she goes away for good, with or without his cooperation. This has gone far enough. It's time that psycho faced some real consequences." Over the next few days, we pored over the files, building an airtight case to present to the authorities. Bank statements, witness testimonies, even phone records indicating Candace's husband had been trying to escape her control in the months before his accident. It was all finally adding up to the truth. The thing that chilled me to the bone the most were the photos from the crime scene. A crumpled car in a ditch, the body extricated and zipped into a black bag on the roadside. I had to look away, feeling sick at the realization that Candace was likely responsible for such a grisly end just to inherit her husband's wealth. "You know she's going to try the same thing with Derek once I'm out of the picture," I told Jill, my voice shaking. "First, it was his inheritance from your parents, and now she wants everything. The house, the cars, the whole lifestyle I built with him. She'll stop at nothing." Jill gave me a determined look. "Not if we stop her first. We've got everything we need to put this monster away for the rest of her life, where she can't hurt anyone else." The next day, we took the file to the police precinct and requested to meet with a detective. I could barely speak as I handed over the evidence, recounting Candace's escalating campaign of abuse and violence against me. The grizzled cop flipped through the documents, his eyes widening. "You're telling me this woman got away with murdering her husband for his money years ago? And now she's trying to do the same thing to her own brother?" I nodded miserably. "Derek is under her total control. She's completely brainwashed him into taking her side over me, no matter what horrible things she does. If you don't stop her reign of terror, I'm afraid of what she's capable of." The detective's jaw tightened grimly. "Don't you worry, ma'am. We've got more than enough here to lock this Candace up and throw away the key. Trying to kill her own flesh and blood for inheritance money? That's a new low, even for my line of work. He paused, seeming to study me closely. I've got to ask, how'd you manage to get all this evidence on her? This is one hell of a case file you've put together. I felt a rush of adrenaline as the weight of everything came crashing down. This was it, the beginning of the end for Candace's twisted reign. No more games, no more manipulation or fake tears, just cold, hard consequences for her unforgivable actions. Let's just say I've had a lot of practice seeing through that snake's lies, I replied tightly. It's time she finally paid for what she's done to my family. As they led me out, I could have sworn I saw the cop giving me the faintest of nods, a look of respect on his weathered face. In that moment, I realized I had been underestimated as a mere victim for far too long. Now the merciless former predator was about to become the prey, and this time I would be the one showing no mercy. I should have known Candace wouldn't go down without one final vicious fight. The day after Jill and I took our damning evidence to the police, the demon herself was waiting when I returned to my friend's apartment. Well, if it isn't the ungrateful little schemer, she sneered as I froze in the doorway. Candace rose from the couch, hands on her hips and eyes glittering with malice. I knew you were plotting something behind my back. My heart pounded, but I refused to show fear. Get out of here, Candace. It's over. The police know everything about what you did. Rather than looking scared, she threw back her head and laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made my blood run cold. You stupid girl. Did you really think a few measly documents would be enough to take me down? I'm afraid you've severely underestimated me. Before I could react, Candace lunged forward and grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the end table, raising it high above her head. This is for sticking your nose where it didn't belong. The vase came crashing down with sickening force, exploding against the back of my skull in a blossom of blinding pain and darkness. I collapsed to the floor in a boneless heap, warm blood gushing from the gash as Candace towered over me. You're dead, you hear me? She snarled, spittle flying from her twisted mouth. This is my house now, my life. I'll make Derek see that you're nothing but a lying, vindictive snake. I struggled to speak, to move, but unconsciousness was rapidly overtaking me. The last thing I saw was Derek himself appearing in the doorway, his expression one of shock and horror. Candace? What have you done? Then everything faded to black. I drifted in and out of awareness, snatches of voices and movement all around me. At one point, I could have sworn I heard the wail of sirens in the distance. When I finally came to, I was in a hospital bed, Jill sitting vigil beside me with a haunted look on her face. My head throbbed with white-hot agony, and I could feel the thick bandages wrapped around my skull. Oh, Tara, thank God, Jill whispered, grabbing my hand. I thought I was going to lose you there for a while. Flashes of memory came flooding back. Candace's twisted sneer, the vase, the blinding pain and blood. I tried to sit up but immediately regretted it, crying out. That psychotic bitch, she really did try to kill me, I rasped, my voice a dry croak. Where is she? Did they arrest her? Jill looked away guiltily. The police took her into custody after I called 911. But, Tara, you're not going to believe this. Derek refused to press charges against her. He says it was just a misunderstanding and that you two fought over him. White-hot rage flooded my system, adrenaline temporarily overriding the pain. I ripped the IV from my arm and tried to swing my legs over the side of the bed. That sniveling coward. After everything she did, he's still defending her? I seethed through gritted teeth. I can't believe this. Jill put a hand on my shoulder, gently restraining me. Tara, please, you're in no condition to go storming off right now. Just take a breath, okay? I wanted to rage and scream, but the stark reality was sinking in. My husband was so twisted by Candace's manipulation that he would literally let her try to kill me and still make excuses for her depravity. Our marriage was broken beyond repair. You're right, I said, sinking back against the pillows in defeat. It's over. Derek is too far gone. He'll never see that evil bitch for what she really is. But even as I spoke the words, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Because in that moment, I realized my battle was no longer with Derek at all. It was with the venomous snake, Candace herself. And this time I would stop at nothing to make sure she faced the consequences she deserved. No more games, no more crying or pleading for my husband to see reason. It was time to go for the jugular, before his deranged sister destroyed anyone else's life like she almost did mine. I turned to Jill, my eyes hardening with resolve. We need to get out of here. I have a plan to put Candace away for good, where she can never hurt another soul. Are you with me? Jill didn't hesitate, giving a grim nod of determination. You know I am. Let's make that psycho finally pay for her crimes once and for all. The hospital room was eerily silent as Derek stepped through the door, his expression unreadable. I tensed instinctively, my hand tightening around Jill's in a silent plea for support. What are you doing here? I asked flatly, unable to mask the bitterness in my voice. Come to make more excuses for your deranged sister? Derek flinched slightly at my tone, but didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sank into it heavily, running a hand over his face. Tara, I don't even know where to begin, he said quietly. What Candace did was unforgivable. Trying to kill you like that in cold blood? He trailed off, shaking his head slowly. Despite the gravity of his words, I felt no satisfaction or relief, only a weary sense of resignation and simmering anger. Save your breath, I cut him off coldly. Your sister is a psychopathic murderer, and you knew it on some level this entire time. You just chose to ignore the ugly truth about her because she was your precious blood relative. Derek opened his mouth to protest, but I barreled on, years of resentment bubbling over. Don't even try to deny it. I showed you all the evidence of her stealing from your inheritance, trying to manipulate you into cutting me out. I had those files proving she killed her own husband for his money. But you just couldn't be bothered to see what was right in front of your face. You're right. The admission was so soft, I almost missed it. Derek's shoulders slumped in defeat. You're absolutely right, Tara. I've been so deep in denial about Candace's true nature that I let her take over my life. I let her abuse you, manipulate me, and turn me against my own wife. He looked up at me then, his eyes haunted. I will regret that for the rest of my days. You didn't deserve any of the hell she put you through. I was just too blind and weak to stand up to her twisted mind games. White, hot anger flared in my chest, and I struggled to keep my voice even. So what? I'm just supposed to forgive and forget now? Let you off the hook because you've suddenly realized what a monster your sister is? No. Derek shook his head slowly. No, I don't deserve forgiveness or another chance. Not after what I allowed to happen under my own roof. I came here to tell you that it's over between us. The words hit me like a physical blow, despite the fact that I'd already accepted our marriage was broken beyond repair. I think some delusional part of me still clung to the hope that Derek would make things right once Candace's evil was exposed. I'm filing for divorce immediately, he continued, unable to meet my eyes, and I'm not going to contest you for anything. The house, the assets, it's all yours. Candace's poisonous influence cost me the best thing I ever had. This is the least I can do. I opened my mouth, but no words would come. Part of me wanted to rage, to hurl vicious recriminations at this pathetic shadow of the man I once loved. But the bigger part of me felt utterly hollow, devoid of any satisfaction or closure from his surrender. Jill spoke up, her voice laced with contempt. So that's it then? You just slink away with your tail between your legs while your demented sister rots in jail? Typical. I wish there was more I could do or say, Derek said heavily. But we both know there's no coming back from the unforgivable things I allowed to happen. You deserve so much better, Tara. With that, he slowly rose and turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at me one final time. For what it's worth, I am sorry, truly sorry, for everything. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our life together. As the tears came, I felt Jill's arms wrap around me in a fierce embrace, letting me finally release the tidal wave of anger, pain, and heartbreak I had been bottling up for so long. My marriage was over. My husband lost to Candace's toxic influence. But in that moment of mourning, I found a strange sense of freedom and determination taking root. Because if Derek was too weak to stand up to his twisted sister, I would be strong enough for the both of us. Candace's evil reign of terror was finally going to end, one way or another. In the days after Derek walked out of my life for good, I found myself at a crossroads. One path led to wallowing in the ashes of my failed marriage, letting the trauma and betrayal consume me. The other That path burned with an icy determination to make things right. "We can't let Candace just walk away from this," I told Jill, my voice hardening. "She tried to kill me, Jill, her own sister-in-law. That kind of depravity can't go unanswered." Jill nodded grimly. "You're right. For too long, that psycho has been able to slither away from the consequences she deserves. It's time we make sure the law catches up to her once and for all." With renewed purpose, we began compiling every shred of evidence we had on Candace. The financial documents, witness statements, everything. A comprehensive paper trail of her decades-long spree of greed, manipulation, and likely murder. "This should be enough to bury that snake for the rest of her miserable life," Jill said, eyeing the thick file with grim satisfaction. No more getting off easy with her crocodile tears. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my heart pounding. This was it. The first steps towards ensuring Candace could never hurt another innocent person like she almost did to me. I was finally taking my power back from her toxic reign of abuse. We took the files straight to the police precinct downtown and requested to meet with a detective. A grizzled veteran in a rumpled suit eventually came to usher us into an interview room, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the damning evidence. "You're telling me this Candace woman has been grifting and manipulating her own family for years?" he said slowly. "Possibly even killed her first husband to inherit his money?" I nodded, holding his gaze steadily. "That's correct, Detective. And her latest stunt was trying to murder me, her own sister-in-law, by bashing my skull in. She's an irredeemable psychopath who will stop at nothing to get what she wants." The cop's jaw tightened as he studied the crime scene photos, the vivid evidence of Candace's brutal attack. "I've seen a lot of low-life scumbags in my day, but this is a new level of depraved." He closed the file and fixed me with an intense look. "Ms. Jennings, I want you to know we're taking this case extremely seriously. With the mountain of proof you've brought us, we're confident we can lock this woman away for a very long time before she has a chance to hurt anyone else." A weight lifted off my shoulders, and I suddenly felt lightheaded with relief. After years of being gaslit and tormented, I was finally being heard and believed about Candace's unforgivable cruelty. "Thank you, Detective," I said, my voice wavering slightly. "You have no idea how much it means to know the law won't let her evil go unanswered this time." The cop offered a grim smile. "No thanks needed, ma'am. We're just doing our job to get a dangerous predator off the streets. You're the one who showed real courage by standing up to this Candace's abuse and not backing down." As Jill and I left the precinct, I felt a sense of peace and resolution wash over me, despite the storm clouds ahead. Candace's reign of terror was finally going to be brought to justice, no matter how much she cried or played the victim card. And in that moment, I realized my own bitter struggle had given me strength I never knew I possessed. The once meek, tormented wife was no more. I was a survivor who had risen from the ashes of Candace's twisted games to fight another day. And this time I would be the one who emerged victorious, while she got to experience the cold, hard consequences she so richly deserved.